The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Nierman, aka Good Lawgic. We got a busy evening. We got a busy show tonight. Busy. I got lots of work. Very busy work to do tonight. Like ground to cover, stuff to jump into. I don't have time. A minute or two is not late. No, I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that criticism. If a minute or two is late, I'm never gonna. That's a yardstick I don't even hope to achieve. So yeah, I'm not late. Defamatory. Any of you say otherwise are defamatory. Defaming me. All right. There's two different fraud topics for us to cover tonight. Fake, not true, wrong, inaccurate, blah, blah, blah. This was when I was on, and I know that yesterday I said I'm going to try and resume the top 25 political moments of 2023. I do plan on resuming that. I'll probably do that over the weekend, like Saturday night, Sunday kind of deal. That's probably when that stuff is going to go down. Tomorrow, I'm thinking I'm going to have my dad on, even though I haven't confirmed with him. We've been back and forth, and like I don't know, his schedule was kind of tough, and he and I were having an interesting discussion about understanding what's happening in the Middle East. He's probably going to be on tomorrow. I'm not promising that. And yeah, exactly. That's what she said. So there you go. Bella Stella, you awesome. 10 Good Logic memberships. In case you're unaware what a Good Logic membership means, it means you become a follower. That's true. Now, some people mistakenly believe that follower means you're a follower of me, yours truly. I am not the leader of the following, which is very much not a cult type of cult. It's not at all a cult type of cult. So, if you're wondering, well, what does that mean when you say it's not a cult? It's not a cult. You're calling me a follower. Yeah, I'm a follower too. When I say it's not a cult, what I mean is there's no spaceships, no Kool-Aid, no self-harm, no harming others, no stabbing yourself in the leg, no stabbing yourself in the ear, no drawing of any blood, no squirrel mutilations, no goat sacrifices, no throwing virgins into Mount St. Helens, mild farming, and no Kool-Aid, no tracksuits, no blood oaths. There's no blood oaths. There's no like sticking a pin in yourself and then stabbing it with a cigarette like you're in some sort of like Italian drama type of thing. You know, this is not like a Cosa Nostra type of deal. It's just about community, unity, and of course, personal growth. So God bless you, Bella Stella, for your generosity. Well, I'm still going to call it Christmas season because if there's 12 days of Christmas, that's got to run well into February. So, God bless you. No, Karen. No squirrel mutilations. No. Zero. None. All right. Now, in an effort to basically remind the universe. This is my ambition. This is part of the entire establishing that 3 of my loyal viewers who seem to disagree with me about virtually every word that comes out of my mouth, one of them being Linda Richards over here. My objective for 2024 is to get at least 2 out of 3 of these women to vote for Trump in the November elections 2024. And that's what tonight's show is all about. The rest of you are just like extraneous. So there you go. It's a cult. Joe's using that double speak. Yeah, 15 minutes early is on time. Slacker. Yeah. All right, let's get started. So you might be saying to yourself, you know, how can I possibly support a man who can't even admit what happened in 2020? can't even admit what happened in 2020 when he clearly very, 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 very much must have lost. Must have lost. That's what you're all saying. Oh, not all of you, but like, not to be target audience members, they're definitely saying that. I know they're saying that. Well, over here today, Trump came out with his summary of election for the 2020 presidential election in the swing states. Now, YouTube wants me to tell you that that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. And I am. So please understand that this is just for critical analysis, for the theories speculating of those folks who question elections. So, which I'm sure Linda's going to start trumpeting very soon. Very, very soon. All right. Here we go. Summary of election. In the 2020 presidential elections in the swing states. Oh, believe it or not, this video has gone yellow. Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. All right. Well, make sure you share with your friends and family. Otherwise, they might miss out on something important. Out of fraud, no action arises. I don't know where these quotes are coming from, but these are the states he's going to go through. Georgia, Wisconsin. Whoa. Oh, that's a jump down. Look at that. It's a jump down. Let's go with the introduction. It has often been repeated. There is, quote, no evidence. Fraud. Actually, there's no evidence that Biden won. Ongoing investigations of the swing states reveal hundreds of thousands of votes were altered and or not lawfully cast in the presidential election. I believe he means 2020. Biden needed them. On election night, November 3rd, 2020, Donald J. Trump was sailing to re-election with landslide leads in numerous battlegrounds. In Georgia, President Trump was up by 12 points, over 335,000 votes. There you go. Just leave this up here the whole time. With 56% of the vote in at 10:17 p.m. In Wisconsin, Trump was leading by 121,380 votes and 5 points at 12:12 a.m., which Fox News anchor Brett Baier noted was, quote, not a small margin. In Pennsylvania. Now, one of the interesting things about this report, all joking aside, one of the interesting things about this report is they have footnotes. There's a lot of footnoting that's happening. So when I see something, I assume this jumps down, right? This jumps. Does it jump? Oh, there you go. Little footnote over here. Look at that. Little footnotes. This is not just something like he's just like talking. No, there's footnotes. There even has links. Oh my.
Gentlemen, stand by. We are getting ready for our first poll closings of the night.
8 hours and 29 minutes. You gotta give me like a little bit more of a timestamp on that. But anyhow, the election was over. However, precincts in Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Milwaukee kept counting until the election results reached the desired outcome, which was the opposite of the will of the voters. Georgia went from having a total of 4.7 million votes, already a record for the state, according to Brad Raffensperger's count on November 4th, to certifying almost 5 million. Georgia is a state that, by the way, with respect to the number of votes, I took note of this because, we spent days waiting for Georgia's tally to come in. And they kept saying there's 140,000 votes left and Trump has a 60,000 vote lead. And I was just like, how can he lose that? How would that possibly happen? And then they would count another 110,000. And they'd be like, well, we're down to the last 220,000 votes left. And I'm like, you had 140,000 left yesterday. You counted 100,000. How is this happening? How is there more votes? Can I go down there and vote? I want to know what's happening. Georgia was doing that over and over and over again. You check the reports of the votes coming out. I'm telling you, I was like, how many votes are left? How many votes? It doesn't make any sense. Getting to this result in Georgia and other states created an irredeemably compromised election filled with violations of the Constitution, unlawful ballots, wide-spoken, broken chain of custody, electronic manipulation, and missing and corrupt election files that made it uncertifiable, except for those who are. It's uncertifiable except for those who are themselves certifiable. And impossible to recreate the results. President Trump was right to voice his objections to what had unfolded before the country's eyes. Republican poll watchers were denied access to the counting in multiple jurisdictions, and ballots were counted in secret in the middle of the night. Without media observers present, countless irregularities emerged, including reports of ineligible voters, voting machine anomalies, water main breaks, improbable percentages of ballots for Biden, and more. Since investigations across the country have uncovered an avalanche. This is a pet peeve of mine. Okay, let me just. This is a real pet peeve of mine. Okay, so I just want to cover this. All right. The word is avalanche. 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 Not avalanche. Avalanche. Just want to make sure. Just to get that. An avalanche. I don't know who started a myth that there's an extra N in there. Only one. It comes before the ch sound. An avalanche of irregularities, unlawful activity, manipulation of electoral records, etc. Findings which are outcome turned are detailed in the summaries of the swing states. Let's get it on. Only 3 people saying that. Tell them to leave echo chamber for a bit and that it's okay to not agree. Oh, yeah, no. Well, and I'll tell you something. The reason I address them, and I address them relatively warmly, is because I respect the fact that they have the, cojones to come in here. Now, sometimes I think they sort of get a little bit trollish, some more than others. I'm not saying that equally. But yeah, it was they can sometimes have their trolley type of moments where they sort of get off on the fact that they feel like they're pricking you. But I respect the fact that they're able to like walk into what many of their fellow folks would call the lion's den. But that's only if they're trying to make me feel like that's if they're trying to rub me and compliment me by calling this the lion's den. Welcome to the lion's den. Georgia. Let's start with Georgia. Let me make sure. YouTube was hiding Joe's stream. Oh, gentle lady. Thank you. I love you guys too. That's too kind. All right. Georgia was called by 11,000. It's a fraud to conceal a fraud. I don't know what these quotes are. I mean, it's a weird thing, but okay. We'll come to it. It's a fraud to conceal a fraud. Georgia was called by 11,779 votes. Fulton County, Georgia, the most populous county in the state, has no digital record of all in-person votes cast in the original results. Not a single ballot purportedly cast during early in-person voting was witnessed to and signed off by poll managers, meaning all the early stuff as required by Georgia election rules. Well, that's kind of an issue. Seals were broken. Memory cards removed from tabulators for the results of these 315,000 votes. Now, you're referencing 315,000 votes, which were printed out on different machines than the ones that tabulated them. Let's check out number 3 here. What do you got? So this is... This is the complaint that was filed about talking about how seals were broken. All right, we can't go through every one of these, but... This prevented reconciliation of how many votes were cast on each machine. Again, now, if you just join us, we're fixating now exclusively on Georgia. We're going to come to other swing states soon. The ballot images of these votes, along with the rest of in-person ballots cast on Election Day, were destroyed. Which, why would any of this stuff be destroyed? The vote in Georgia was counted 3 times. Original machine count, statewide hand recount, and a second machine count. Each time the state and Fulton County reported 3 different results. So I want to be clear on this because I want to sort of, from what I understand, from what I understand, 3 different results is not, even though it's, you would think you should never have a different result. You would think you should never have a different result. I don't think that 3 different results, I think that that's probably more common than having the same result number. I think that's probably more common when you're talking about millions of votes. So if they're off by 30 votes here or 27 votes there, I don't think that that's uncommon. I think that's probably the norm. That's my expectation. Should it be that way? No. I mean, it's 2023. You would think we should be able to, actually count up the right number of votes. I'm simply saying human error. That happens. That probably happens. Now, how much they're off by, if they're off by 3 votes or 7 votes or even 100 votes, that's a lot less disconcerting than if it's off by, over 1,000. At a certain point, you would expect to be levels of quality control. But yeah, I'm going to be real with you on things that, to me, that's a fair, I'll say this is a fair point. This is a little bit weak. So I'm telling you, this one, to me, okay. Fulton County did not count the same ballots during the original count and the machine recount. There are 19,541 distinct ballots that appear in one machine count, but not the other. That's significant. To me, 19,000 in just one county. And I know it's the most populous county, but 19,000, when you have a vote difference of 11,779 votes, that's pretty strange. What is this little thing here? The Election Oversight Group, LLC, investigation of the Fulton County 2020 general election irregularities and failures of 3 counts. Wow. Thousands of fraudulent presidential-only ballots were injected into the second machine count with huge margins favoring Biden. This is very weird also. And I understand you might say, well, people care about the presidential election. They don't care as much about about the other elections. First of all, you need to remember that there was 2 Senate races going on. 2. It was a big deal, the election of 2020. Ballots that are blank, except for the presidential contest, were counted in batches together, with the pattern appearing in at least 8 counties, including Fulton. This means Georgia did not have the votes to justify its original election results. It's very strange to have thousands of presidential-only ballots. And that's very, very strange. I'd want to know more about how many thousands. The second machine count was over 17,000 votes short. Fulton County was instructed to reconcile the results by the Secretary of State. And how can you be 17,000 votes short? I mean, that's crazy. So Fulton County was instructed to reconcile the results by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and recertify its results without divulging the extent of the vote deficiency to members of the Fulton County Board of Registrations and Elections. This is funky as all get out. This, you know what? This should definitely come out in the Fannie Willis case, you would think. Thousands of bogus votes were ultimately added into election results via the second machine count. This includes 20,977 unsubstantiated votes of unknown origin. The results were missing 17,852 ballot images and included 3,125 duplicate ballot images that were counted twice. At least 2,871 ballots were counted 2 or 3 times in the second machine count, totaling 6,118 questionable votes. Also, they're counting the 3,125 duplicate and the 2,871. That wouldn't be 6,118. Oh, you're saying the 2,871 counted multiple times until they got to 6,118. What's your source on this? This is the spreadsheet Fulton County missing balance image recount. I gotta tell you, I'm loving the footnotes. I'm loving the footnotes. 88% of Fulton County's precincts reported a different total number of votes between the first and second machine count. That's crazy. That's crazy. 88% of their precincts have a different number of votes between the first and second machine count. 88%. You want to, if you told me 5%, I'd be like, that seems a little high. 88% have it of the precincts have a different total number of votes. I'm going to tell you this. This is, forget about, I'm again focusing on, you know, my three listeners here. You should be bothered by Georgia's incompetence in how to run a healthy election just from this statement alone. 88% of Fulton County's precincts reporting a different total number of votes between the first and second machine counts. 88% can't get it right back to back. That is incompetence. It doesn't matter who the winner is. There's incompetence. My God. My God. This is just incompetence. How stupid are you? It's not like this is like the most populous state in the country. This is just unbelievable. The only electronic votes that survived from the first count were the mail-in ballots. Since they were tabulated on the high-speed scanner, their ballot images were automatically uploaded on the election server. 90% of those counts, those approximately 148,000 absentee ballots cast in Fulton County, cannot be authenticated. Ballot images for 132,284 mail-in votes have no SHA file, which is created automatically when a ballot is scanned and used to authenticate the digital image of a vote, lacking evidence they were scanned tabulated property or even cast by a real voter. Wow. 132,000 mail-in votes that just have no file created with them that should have naturally been created with them. What the hell's going on here? I mean, what the hell's going on? Ask yourself, what the heck is going on? It's 2020. Hey, England DG, been a while. It's 2023. That means it's more important to count genders than votes. No, it's 2024 now. So, I don't know. Maybe a new day. Maybe a new day. I believe the law is that ballot images and other election records are supposed to be kept for 2 years before they can be destroyed. I don't think Georgia was the only state to destroy them early. No, they weren't. You're correct. Key districts in the grasp of bad faith actors shall stall to waive the state's overall count. They fortify as needed, and it's only getting worse, like Arizona. Yeah, well, I to me, it seemed very funky. It seemed like the lead kept shrinking and shrinking, and then it's like, oh well, we're down to the last 30,000 votes, and they would count like another 50,000 votes, and they'd be like, well, we're down to the last 15,000 votes. It's like, yeah, imagine only 22% right. It's actually only 12% right because 88% leaves 12%. You're using lawyer math there or something. I don't know what's happening with you, Joe. Brad Raffensperger was heartily reelected. Yeah. It's a sad world we live in. Or maybe it was this. Who the hell knows? 104,994 ballot image files. Of these, mail-in ballots from the original count contained identical modified timestamps, suggesting electronic manipulation. Understand what this means. Meaning, there's 104,000 ballot image that all have a thing saying they were modified at the exact precise moment. So you have to ask yourself, how does that happen? How does like the same second of same time of the same day, it sounds like someone was just click and all of a sudden they were modified. That's what it sounds like when you have 104,994 ballot image files. Now maybe there's some sort of explanation as to why it is that would happen, and I can come up with an explanation for you. Because I'm not looking to get to something. I'm simply trying to search truth. So sometimes when I'm searching for truth, thoughts will pop into my head which will favor Trump, and some will not favor Trump. So if I want to try to come up with an explanation as to why this might make sense, without it being illicit. It could be that there's certain modifications that happen to, let's say, for example, some ballot image scan is has some sort of offline thing, so they have to like move it to make it properly squared up, or whatever it is. It could be that they do like thousands of entries, and they just sort of click off this one, 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 or more likely, if you were talking about 100,000 of them, they would say anything which is showing anything that's scanned that shows that these, we're going to click off, do a search for anything where the image starts more than 3/4 of an inch away from the top of the ballot. Okay, so let's say all of them are supposed to start within the top 3/4 of an inch of the ballot. I'm just making something up completely here, but to give you by way of an example as to how to try and justify in a way that this would not be illicit, this statement here, as far as electronic manipulation that was illicit. So maybe they're all being moved, and then you basically search for, and you do a search. Whoever's doing this is doing a search and says, adjust them upward to move them all within the top inch of a ballot. They all have to be in the top inch of a ballot. Some of them, for one reason or another, were adjusted downward. So you want to move them all up. So you might do a search for 100, and there are 100,000 results. You do select all, and then you hit enter, and they all would just be moved up. It really could be something like that. It doesn't have to be like switch Trump vote to Biden. So does this seem like there's electronic manipulation? I think it's almost irrefutable, given the numbers, that there's electronic manipulation. The question is the nature of what that manipulation was. And we're sort of left in the dark to just sort of trust without any possibility of verifying. And the verification after is an important part of the trust. This is why I'm frequently talking to you about the importance of not simply integrity, but transparency of integrity. So, yeah, I want to just share that thought with you. Fulton County does not know how many voters cast votes, and its lack of basic accounting controls make it impossible to determine who really won in 2020, according to Philip Stark, University from Berkeley, a Berkeley professor who invented risk-limiting audits. Stark noted electronic records election are not intact. 376,000 ballot images are missing from the first machine count, which includes all in-person votes in Fulton County. That's a lot of ballot images to go missing. That's like 5%, right? And there's like 6 million votes, and you're talking 376,000. That's more than 5%. It's probably close to like 7%. That's a lot. That's a lot to go missing. In an election that's won by 11,000, it's a lot to go missing. What's your source for that? Oh, that's also from this. Let's see what the source is for this. Oh, that's from the press conference. Wait, what is this?
Electronically. I want to welcome everybody to this. I'm Garland Favorite. I'm the co-founder of VoterGA. That stands for Voters Organized for Trusted Election Results in Georgia. We are a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit. If you like what you hear today and you think it's worth the effort for us to continue try to save the election integrity.
So that's important. That's at least purportedly nonpartisan, and that they're just looking for so that they're relying on sources that are not just some crazy Trumpers, but he purports at least to be someone who's nonpartisan. I don't know anything about this individual, but this is their source for number 12 here. No, not number 12. For this 376,000 ballot images that went missing. That should be disconcerting to everyone. None of the 315,000 votes cast during early voting in Fulton County were witnessed to and signed by the poll manager and 2 poll workers as required by state election rules, which the closing tapes for these votes are all unsigned, showing more tabulated votes than the tabulators have recorded as scanning in the protective counters. They recorded probably low percentages for President Trump, and they recorded improbably low percentages for President Trump. For example, President Trump received only 0.9%, 2.4%, 3.7% from the state, some of the tabulators. That's unbelievable. Less than 1%. I mean, that's impossible. That's impossible. As if he was a third-party candidate or in a third-world country. The anomalies indicate ballots were not scanned on the tabulators that printed the closing tapes, making the closing tapes fraudulent. This right here, this paragraph right here, I ask anyone to just explain, just, I mean, how is it that he can get 0.9% or even 3.7%? It's not possible. It's not possible. That wouldn't happen in the most, I don't care what ethnicity you choose. Pick any ethnicity you like. Any ethnicity. The most anti-Trump ethnicity is still going to give him 12%. I mean, an ethnicity which is, and first of all, why you would have just one ethnicity in a batch is difficult to fathom in the first place. But the worst of the worst of the worst, most anti-Trump ethnicities, you don't get 0.9%. This is something you have to recognize that doesn't make any sense. And if you fail to recognize that that doesn't make sense, you might refute what they're saying and say, well, that's not true. But to say that this makes sense shows a certain level of just derangement. Because there's always people who oppose, who are against like what you expect them to be. There's always. I mean, it's as stupid as saying like 97% of scientists all agree on something. It doesn't make sense. It's just not reality. It's just, nothing ever works that way. And when they don't have the images, when they can't verify, and they have something that's so anomalous as to belie belief, this is when you stand behind this and you say, aha, you see, this, this is obviously true, and you reject information like this as saying that's not possible, as being like a conspiracy crazy talk. You're not the one who sounds rational. You sound rather irrational. If you tell me that in the state of Florida that there's some sort of precinct or section of votes of 100,000 votes that came out 99,000 to 1 for Trump, I would say that sounds pretty fraudulent. Even 97 to 3. It doesn't happen. If that happened in Arkansas, pick a state in Oklahoma. If that happened amongst, if you think that it's racially motivated, if that happened in a sea of albinos, that it was 96,000 to 4,000 for Trump, I'd be like, you're insane. That doesn't happen. And it cuts both ways. And if you can't recognize that, that doesn't make the other people the crazies. That kind of makes you the crazy. You have to live in reality and recognize that even if you disagree with folks, there are a certain percentage of people who are going to disagree with you. So this to me is a very telling thing. When you have crazy low percentages and that they can't back it up with any sort of verifiable evidence, this is why there was outrage on January 6th. This is why. Because it's shady. It's shady as all get out by people who claim that he's Hitler. And Scott Adams pointed out, if you really think he's that terrible a human being and you didn't cheat to stop him find by any means necessary to stop him, what the hell is wrong with you? Why wouldn't you? So once you create a mindset of this is a level of evil, which is existential threat, which is what is being labeled today, and they certainly were thinking that back in 2020, and then you have these weird numbers that are impossible to happen and no verification, and you say someone who's questioning this is a crazy election denier. No, they're a BS. They just have a BS meter that you've turned off. Your decision to turn off a BS meter doesn't mean the people who can smell the stench are in the wrong. Just means that you've just plugged your nose because it's more comfortable for you to plug your nose. Tabulators used in Fulton County during early voting had their seals broken and memory cards were reprogrammed and inserted into different scanners to count absentee ballots in violation of election rules. This made it impossible to reconcile a true number of votes tabulated on records machines from the start of elections to the end of counting. 235,000 absentee ballots requested and accepted too early prior to lawful date, 180 days before the 2020 election. That's a lot of absentee ballots requested, which was May 6, 2020. These votes should never been counted in the 2020 election. And you have to ask yourself, why is there so many people who are asking for early for absentee ballots? I mean, they're doing this in the middle of COVID. Like everyone's terrified about COVID. And they're like, oh, I got to get my absentee ballot now. Hundreds of thousands of people? Hundreds of thousands? Okay. 4,081 false votes for Biden were including the hand count audit results for Fulton County. These false, and what's your source on that? This let me audit spreadsheet analysis. Okay. The false votes were a result of 36 accounting errors, which were confirmed by Brian Kemp's office investigators working for Secretary Raffensperger, yet they have never been removed from the official hand count results. These errors alone would reduce the margin to 7698 votes. So he didn't lose by 11,000. He lost by 7,600 or under 7,700. And the reason they wouldn't remove it is because the closer that number gets to zero, they recognize how sus that sounds. So, yeah, he won anyway. Let's leave it at 11,000. The hand count audit included 3,935 unaccounted for votes due to 11 missing batch sheets in Fulton County. Differences from the original count to the hand audit total at least 15,690 votes, which is more than the entire election margin alone. This includes the 4,081 false votes, plus missing votes discovered in Gwinnett, Fayette, and Floyd, Douglas, Walton counties that were likely due to machine counting errors. Thousands of this is why Trump was saying, I don't need you to go through the entire thing. Just get your 12,000. That's what he meant when he said that. Go through this. Spend the time to actually go through this crap, and you'll see that there's all these different errors. And they want to try and turn that statement into like pressuring someone to break the law. It's like, no, do your stinking job. Do your friggin' job, Raffensperger. I guess maybe he was doing a job, just wasn't necessarily figuring out the will of the Georgia people. Not caring much about the will of Georgians. Thousands of pristine, unfolded absentee ballots were counted during the hand count audit in Fulton County, according to at least 6 witnesses, which is the subject of ongoing litigation. The absentee ballots had no folds and went 98% to Joe Biden and had been added in a fraudulent manner, witnesses said. This is something I remember reading about. I remember seeing an old woman who had done many of these things, elections, saying that she had never seen ballots that looked like these and that there were thousands of them, and they all seemed to go for Joe Biden. These are the affidavits from the 6 different witnesses. Fulton County, this is why I'm saying I'm fairly confident he won Georgia. Fulton County certified 59,143 in-person votes for Election Day, despite the fact that only 14,152 people had voted as of 5 p.m. How's that possible? That the Election Day totals inflated by 37,000 votes? As records show, no rush to the polls in the final 2 hours of voting. They got 15,000 all day. And I can understand, look, you'll say a lot of people who work are going to come afterwards and come to the last 2 hours. But as records show, no rush to the polls in the final 2 hours of voting, and screenshot of the in-person Election Day results shared by government contractors showed only 21,000 people voted in the polls in Fulton County. Wow. So you got an extra 37,000 votes that you can't figure out. Like, what the hell happened? That's crazy. This is craziness. Fulton County ordered over 1 million absentee ballots before the 2020 election without any envelopes and the time necessary to mail. There were only 808,000 active voters in Fulton County, and they ordered 1 million absentee ballots, meaning the county had more blank mail-in ballots than the number of registered voters, and it ordered them after the vast majority of mail-in ballot requests had already been sent. There's something really funky. An estimated 30,000 to 92,670 illicit votes were trafficked in Georgia as part of a massive ballot trafficking operation discovered by True the Vote. The group identified 242 traffickers in Georgia who engaged in 5,600 ballot drops into drop boxes, making an average of 23 runs per trafficker. Over 40% of the illicit drops that were captured on camera were recorded between the non-voting hours of midnight and 5 a.m. Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is so outrageous. 364,000 ineligible voter registrations on the rolls during the 2020, and likely 67,000 votes were cast from voters with invalid residency. Now, how do they get this? This is when they talk about this. This is exactly the sort of stuff that people get mad. They're like, how do you get to 67,284? That's a very precise number. So what is your source? This is what I want to know. Kim P. Brooks, ballots with a purposeful bad address accepted 2023. See, I want to find this because when they have precise numbers like this, it really makes me curious. Like, what is your source for that? That's a very precise number. When I see precise numbers, I'm like, there had to be some. What did you do to come up with that number? One of the things Giuliani did was he kept coming up with precise numbers of dead people. I'm like, how do you know this so fast? They're so desperate. Why can't I find Kim P. Brooks ballots with purposeful bad addresses? I don't see anything here. I want to find this. So they're saying it's not a real thing. See, I'm wondering what the hell that is. Whenever you see a precise number, the first question should be like, what is your source? How did you come to that information? Kim P. Brooks. I can't find that. I'm not going to kid you. If I can't find it, I can't take it seriously. I can't take it seriously if I can't find it. There should be some source where we find Kim Brooks somewhere. Massive manipulation of Georgia voter rolls surrounding the 2020 election have been uncovered. This includes 1,500 voter IDs that received credit for voting in 2020, but were not on any voter rolls from 2020. Some appearing for the first time in voter rolls on November 4, 2021, a year after the election. Wow. Other findings include manipulation of inactive voters to cast ballots, gifting November 3rd votes up to 2 years after the election, and casting votes on ballots previously rejected, canceled, or not even turned in. Wait, what's your source on this? It's 27. They keep saying this Kim Brooks. I can't believe it's made up. That doesn't make sense. They even saying the page number. I'm very bothered why I can't find this Kim Brooks thing. Is this it? Mm-hmm. I'm bothered by that. In 2020, there were absentee ballots issued to Bangkok, Thailand, Georgia, Denver, Georgia, Detroit, Georgia, LA, Georgia, and other fraudulent addresses that do not exist. Ballots were fraudulently cast in 2020 from addresses listed as Bronx, Georgia, Hilton Head, Georgia, Louisville, Georgia, San Diego, Georgia, etc., etc. All with zip codes out of state. What the hell is happening? 43,907 Dropbox ballots violate chain of custody requirements in DeKalb County. What's your source on that? That's Laura Begard. Let's see if you have a source on this. Okay, so this seems like it's at least a source. Ah, dang it. Really? $59,000 of the 79,000 Dropbox in Fulton County were not immediately transported to election registrar. 355,000 ballot transfer forms missing. 100. These are all chain of custody issues. 100,000 tally sheets for Fulton County missing from the hand count. In early January 2021, Ruby Freeman asked for an attorney because she wanted to go live on every platform to divulge information about how the USB ports were used in the 2020 election. The expert cyber report by Professor J. Alex Haldeman explained how external USB ports with election-changing malware can be inserted into Dominion machines by anyone with access, including election workers. This is dangerous stuff. A lot of people lost a lot of money making claims against Freeman and Dominion. I'm just reading what's here. I don't know any of that. I seen how people have lost their shirts by being unable to substantiate claims here. So I'm being wary here for you. I'm being wary for you. Where's 34? Chapter 2-3 of the report on widespread fraud. 2:13 and 14. The presence of a QR code mismatch error within Dominion tabulators that systematically undercounts votes were found in 65 out of 67 Georgia counties where records were available. The error was present in the system log files for tabulators used in 2020, 21, and 22. All right. I think that pretty much wraps it up here. Election results in Georgia 2020 are not only unreliable, but are electronically altered and are unsupported by states' own election records. Fulton County election officials admitted in early 2021 they do not engage in any reconciliation until weeks after Election Day. This means the number of voters showing up at the polls each day of voting is not checked with the number of ballots tabulated each day. What a freaking mess. They suck at this. They're so bad at this. They are so bad at this. We can't start reconciling that until usually a couple of days before certification. That's pathetic. That's pathetic. Quote, because we have to get that report from NoLink, I think NoLink sends those to the state and NoLink sends these directly to us, but these aren't compiled by them on election night, so we don't have any way to balance those then. That's like the post-election process that we do. Basically, we suck at what we're supposed to be doing. That's essentially what Georgia says. But anyone who says that they got it wrong must be they must be out to they're an election denier. It's not an election denier. An election definitely happened. Just an accuracy questioner. Let me see what you guys are talking about here before we get into Wisconsin. As a Georgian, it's sad, really sad to review this. I want to make fun of Florida for not having the crap together. They now do. Yeah, it's true. Val. The biggest issue I had with 2020 was that Dems blocked every attempt to investigate what happened and why it looked off. And they destroyed documents that are required to be kept 8 months after an election. Yep, that's what I said. It's not just about integrity. It's about the appearance. You know what? Here's the thing also. I'm just going to pause. I want to pause. If they really believe themselves that they won, if they really, really believe they won, they would be so proudly running forward with the evidence. They'd be like, here, take a look at it for yourselves. Here, there it is. You look. You'll see that Biden won the state. If they really, really believed it. This is why I think in my heart of hearts, it's pretty evident they don't believe it. It's only when you're worried about your own inaccuracies that you start engaging in cover-ups. If you're confident that everything was legit, you're proud to show how you got where you got and put all that to bed. You know, I was reviewing earlier today on Locals a debate that I had with Destiny about the fraud, about the Florida indictments against Trump. And he's like, why didn't Trump just come forward and say, I declassified? Why didn't he just do that? And I was like, I don't know. He's got a Fifth Amendment right. And he does. He doesn't have to tell the FBI anything. He's not allowed to lie to them, but he doesn't have to come forward and give his explanations to them. It's pretty stupid to do so. If you know anything about criminal defense, the FBI is investigating you. For you to volunteer information, you're kind of a jackass and a fairly stupid individual. So why didn't he say it? I can give you 1,000 reasons he wouldn't have said it. Contrast that. Well, over there, you could be like, well, you have reasons to, he's being questioned. So open up, have full disclosure, and then you have nothing to worry about. That's the mindset that the left has with respect to his Fifth Amendment rights, that he should just waive his Fifth Amendment rights. There are reasons to have Fifth Amendment rights. It's because we don't trust the government to be doing things accurately. Well, the government, which has a duty to its people to handle elections properly, they're the ones who should be obligated to say, here, look, go look for yourselves. Gross. Copy and pasting doesn't change metadata. The file itself had to have been changed. I didn't say copy and pasting. I'm saying if they let's say moved it up. But look, it could be. And since it could be that they flipped votes, I don't know. You're talking about the 104,000 things that will happen the same second, I assume, with this super chat. And you're saying that wouldn't change the metadata. I don't know. Maybe you're accurate about that. I haven't seen their systems and what would make it reflect a modulation. I'm simply saying we don't know the nature of the modulation. So, if you're defending the government, you'd be like, no, that's not at all what the nature of the modulation was. Unfortunately, the question is, how do we know? There's got to be some way to figure that out. Aliens came from outer space. They messed up our voting systems. Look at the UFOs have been documented since. Move your butts like the stream now, people. Yeah, what's taking you so long? I'm about to check up on you, Rumble folks. I'm about to check up. I'm giving you like 10 seconds so that the time delay you can see. But I'm about to do my daily check as to how many thumbs up I got, because I'm sure I have several hundred of you liking, and I'll bet you anything that right this second I have under 100 likes. But I'm about to check in a second. We'll see. Raffensperger's number 2 guy was equally egregious, if not worse. And then he talked about his wife being Cuban, so he couldn't be a comic. Turns out his father-in-law was a spy for Castro. Whoops! Snuggle Struggle says Bridgeport, Connecticut mayor's staff were caught stuffing the ballot boxes. Court ordered a revote. Fraud. Democrat representative claims that uncharted waters, exact same rhetoric they used to persecute President Trump. Yeah. My Google foo brings up a 6-hour-old Washington Post article stating the same problem with citation of Kim P. Brooks. Yeah, I don't know what that is. The Kim P. Brooks thing is bothersome. I'd rather have no source than a bad source. A bad source it just makes everyone question anything you're saying. So I don't know what that's about. I'm going to kid you. I just want accuracy. Stop lying to us. So, let me see as I check on my Rumble chats here. Denise says, Joe, this is all old news. You should follow CanCon Actual, Bezzy Tweets, and Neil E. Johnson on Twitter. They have been investigating a report on the election fraud 2020 since it happened. Well, what's not old news, Denise, is that this is a report that Trump's camp came out with today. So there's that. 91, 392 liking, watching on Rumble, 91 with my thumbs up. And I'm not even really watching on Rumble. Wishaw says, don't repeat aloud. All right. I won't. And I agree. I agree. If you want to find out what she said, you got to go to Locals. That was in goodlogic.locals.com. There you go. Only those folks in Locals get to see that one. Okay. Where was I? Wisconsin. Let's get to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was called by 20,682 votes. Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled drop boxes were illegal under Wisconsin law. In July 2022, Wisconsin Election Commissioner Megan Wolf unilaterally declared ballot drop boxes could be used to vote into the 2020 elections, even though the Wisconsin Election Commission's commissioners never voted to adopt this memo. That's pretty strange. See, this is a source. That's a source. We like sources. Ahead of the November 2020 election, Wolf encouraged clerks to use creative solutions to deploy drop boxes that she said would be unstaffed. There were 528 drop boxes used in the general election, a total of 1,969,000 absentee votes cast, including 1,346,000 votes cast by mail and 653,236 in person. In a concurring opinion onto the ruling finding of drop boxes to be unlawful, Justice Rebecca Bradley writes, quote, if the right to vote is to have any meaning at all, elections must be conducted according to law. Throughout history, tyrants have claimed electoral victory via elections conducted in violation of governing law. In Wisconsin, election officials derived their just powers from the consent of the governed. The right to vote presupposes the rule of law governs elections. If elections are conducted outside law, President have not conferred the consent on the government. Such elections are unlawful, and the results are illegitimate. People don't talk about Wisconsin enough. I've talked about Wisconsin, I think, more than most. Right, I said, because Wisconsin was one that just seemed to just be forgotten about pretty quickly. But Wisconsin was always one that I was like, that election stunk to high heaven. Justice Bradley concluded thousands of votes have been cast via this unlawful method using drop boxes, thereby directly harming the Wisconsin voters. The illegality of these drop boxes weakens the people's faith that the election produced an outcome reflective of their will. See, stuff like this gives me heart for 2024. That I don't think this is going to work a second time. A lot of people question, they're like, well, why should we go for Trump? If they hate him so much that they're going to cheat, so they're going to cheat again in 2024, which is a logical question to be asking. And what I'm saying is, I think a lot of this stuff has been so exposed and is going to be so scrutinized, I don't think it's going to get off the ground the way it did last time. I'm hopeful for, at least. Bradley writes, the Wisconsin voters and all lawful voters are injured when institution charged with administering Wisconsin elections does not follow the law, leaving the results in question. Electoral outcomes obtained by unlawful procedures corrupt the institution of voting, degrading the very foundation of free government. Unlawful votes do not dilute lawful votes so much as they pollute them, which in turn pollutes the integrity of the results. Don't dilute so much as they pollute. It's worse than diluting. In the city of Milwaukee, nearly half of its votes were cast by mail, totaling 217,000 ballots. The city deployed 15 drop boxes, with election officials claiming the drop boxes would be under 24-hour surveillance. However, after the election, not a single municipality in the county produced video surveillance of drop boxes in response to open records requests. Various responses include no records exist for your request, no video from requested time frame, no such records exist, and no security camera. So they claimed they were going to be watching them, but they certainly don't claim after the fact that they did. Election integrity group True the Vote found 107 ballot traffickers in Milwaukee County between October 20th and November 3rd, who each made 20 or more visits to the drop boxes. Each trafficker made an average of 26 visits for a total of 520 visits, and as many as 15 in one day, and made multiple visits to non-governmental organizations. And obviously when they're visiting, it's not with one ballot. They're coming with batches and batches and batches of ballots. The 107 traffickers made a total of 2,800 trips to drop boxes during the 2020 election, with the majority of visits occurring after 8 p.m. In 2020, there was a surge of indefinitely confirmed votes in Wisconsin, resulting in 220,000 votes cast by individuals who were exempted from showing voter ID. This surge of suspect votes was due to Democrat election clerks giving advice that was deemed illegal after the election, instructing voters to identify themselves as disabled during the COVID pandemic to avoid voter ID laws. Wow. Why would disabled people not have to provide ID? That's ridiculous. Indefinitely confined voters who were supposed to be physically unable to go to the polls due to age, illness, increased by an astounding 393% in Dane County from 2016 to 2020, 492% in Racine, 281% in Milwaukee, 287% in the state overall. Unbelievable. Just 56,978 indefinitely confined votes in 2016, roughly 70,000 in 2029. But in 2020, there were 220,000. Scott McDonald, Democrat clerk of Dane County, which encompasses the area of Madison, told all residents they could identify themselves as indefinitely confined because of COVID. That's a way to get around voter ID law. McDonald previously blamed Wisconsin's voter ID law for President Trump's victory in 2016. Oh, it's not fair that we have to have voter ID, claiming in 2018 Twitter post that thousands of voters were deterred from voting due to the ID law. So this guy, Scott McDonald, the clerk of Dane County, seems to have an issue with Trump winning elections. So he said, don't follow the law. In 2020, McDonald urged all voters to declare themselves indefinitely confined in order to obtain an absentee ballot and skip the step of uploading an ID. What a schmuck. What a schmuck. I urge all voters to request a ballot and get trouble presenting a valid ID to indicate that they're indefinitely confined. So basically, whoever wanted a ballot in Wisconsin can get one. That's essentially what you're saying. You want a ballot? Just ask. Claim you're confined. We'll give you one. What a complete jackass. Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled in December 20 that the pandemic did not render all Wisconsin electors indefinitely confined, thereby obviating the requirements of valid photo ID in an absentee ballot. And the clerk's interpretation was Wisconsin election laws was erroneous. It wasn't erroneous. It was a scam. That's what it was. If you ask me, the whole thing's a scam. The WEC ordered nursing homes to violate the law by not allowing special voting deputies inside the facilities, which led to election fraud where incapacitated elderly residents had votes cast in their name with the assistance of nursing home staff. This is just ridiculous. An investigation by Racine County Sheriff found that WEC shattered state election laws. And there was an unusual surge in voting activity. At least 8 cases of felony voter fraud, which that's not 1 or 2 votes when it's a felony voter fraud. WEC Commission admitted it was essentially telling the clerks to break the law by ordering the sending of absentee ballots to nursing homes and barring the special voting deputies inside the facilities. This is craziness. This is really craziness. An interim report released by Special Counsel Michael J. Gableman raised serious and legitimate questions that the certification of Wisconsin election results may have been undertaken in an unlawful and unconstitutional manner. I think this covers enough for Wisconsin. The report confirms at least 17.5% of election clerks were not properly trained. Exploitation of elderly has occurred in nursing homes. In one example, Barrett, who was 104 years old and did not recognize her own children, had a ballot cast in her name in the 2020 presidential election. Look at this. Merrill Barrett, 104 years old, doesn't recognize her own children. She voted. She'll probably vote in the next 3 or 4 elections too. And unbelievable. Office of Special Counsel's second interim report found nursing homes in Milwaukee, Dane, and Racine counties with 100% turnout due to Wisconsin election order. This is such a scam. So we're seeing wackiness going on in the nursing homes, encouraged by the clerks who are overseeing the election. Second interim report also detailed an $8.8 million election bribery scheme involving Mark Zuckerberg's Center for Tech and Civic Life in the cities of Milwaukee, Madison, Racine, Kenosha, and Green Bay. In the agreement, the cities took the Center for Tech and Civic Life money to facilitate in-person absentee voting within their respective city. Wisconsin Safe Voting Plan developed for CTCL facilitated grants to major Wisconsin cities to deploy drop boxes for mail-in boxes, including 50,000 to Green Bay, 40,000 to Kenosha, 50,000 to Madison, etc. And they're saying that there was bias by the people who are running it. And internal emails from election officials in Green Bay revealed Michael Spitzer Rubenstein, a former DNC operative, served as de facto elections administrator and had access to Green Bay's absentee ballots days before the election. Wow. Unbelievable. People are sick. Get ready for the election year variant to force us all inside and have to mail in. I don't think that's going to happen. It could. Wouldn't shock me. Wouldn't shock me. But I don't think they're going to try to go back to that well. Lost in Law. How you doing, Tim? Joe, we knew it was bad. Did you expect it was this bad? No. But GOP has no fight. They'll just accept it, engage in themselves. Who can out-scam who? The problem is this. The problem is a lot of people in the GOP really don't care. They really don't like Trump because it's a friggin' uniparty. So they'd rather have Democrats win than Trump win. So that's a massive part of the problem. It's a massive part of the problem. See, they have these quotes here. I don't know what these quotes, why this is related to Pennsylvania rather than Wisconsin. It's a little weird to me. I'm not going to kid you. Pennsylvania was called by 80,000 votes. Okay. This is something I want to see. let's get to Pennsylvania. Let me just double check here and make sure I didn't miss anything going on in Rumble. Let me check on my locals, make sure things are good there. We're good there. All right, let's get back to work. All right, months after the election, there were 121,240 more votes than voters. Let's check this out. What's your source for this? Verify vote, Pennsylvania voter deficit, verify vote. Let's check this out. What let me just, I'm looking for 121,240 more votes than voters. How is that possible? So for the 2020 general election, Pennsylvania requires a count of 7,035,796 ballots. This includes ballots with votes for one of the three major presidential candidates, all write-in votes, all overvotes, all undervotes. The 71,000 late mail ballots. After all counties closed, the election ensured only 6,914,000 voters were credited with participation. So that's not how many. Right. Republican lawmakers led by State Representative Frank Ryan were tracking the vote discrepancy in real time in the statewide Uniform Registry of Electors. Ryan, a certified public county, initially reported that there were 170,000 more votes than voters in presidential race, more than twice the margin in Pennsylvania. These numbers just don't add up, and the alleged certification of Pennsylvania's presidential election results was absolutely premature, unconfirmed, and an error. Pennsylvania's Department of State office called this obvious misinformation while admitting the only way to determine the number of voters who voted in November from the SURE system is through the vote histories, which they say Philadelphia, Allegheny, and other counties had still not completed. An admission the election was certified without ensuring the number of voters and votes matched the SURE system. The election was certified November 24th. The Department of State statement came out on December 29th. Yeah, well, Shapiro is about as shady as anyone I've seen. The SURE system was checked and downloaded weekly with uploaded voter histories from the general election until the counties uploaded their vote histories, which was not completed until February 2021. At this time, there were still over 121,000 votes that did not have corresponding voter in the SURE system. How does that happen? The Department of State says that the voting would reconcile once the counties completed their SURE records were incorrect. According to Verify, when the final count finished uploading the voter histories and closed the election in SURE, it was February 1, 2021, which was the same day that Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar announced her resignation. What? What? At that time, Philadelphia closed the elections in SURE. The voter history showed the county accepted at least 7,944 ballots that could not be associated with a registered voter. Pennsylvania credited 71,000 people for voting who returned mail-in ballots after Election Day, and these elections were included in the voter history files. This includes 50,285 received votes between November 4th and November 6th, 11,000 between November 7th and November 11th, 10,000 received after November 12th. Boockvar claimed only 10,000 ballots were received between the close of polls on Election Day, November 6th. Liar, liar, your pants are on fire. Liar, liar, your pants are on fire. Oh, gosh. Unbelievable.
You, sir, are a liar. Liar. Your pants are on fire.
So there you go. All right. While 71,000 people received credit for voting by mail, these votes purportedly did not count. Even while including these voters in the number who participated in the election, still came up 121,000 voters short. So even with the 71,000, according to the Department of State, there was 7 million ballots cast in 7,035,000 ballots cast in the 2020 election. But according to Shure, as we just saw, only 6,914,000 voters were credited with participating in the election. How the hell is this possible? In Philadelphia, hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots were unlawfully counted in secret in defiance of a court order, while Republican poll watchers were thrown out buildings where voting took place. Yep. Ron Coleman was one of the folks who was there. I saw him on video. U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain was told to stand down and not investigate election irregularities by Attorney General Bill Barr. McSwain said he was instructed to not discuss the allegations of voter fraud and to pass any serious investigations along to then State Attorney Josh Shapiro, who's one of the most corrupt individuals who ever lived. And he was, and that's one of the things that made me very sus about him. He's a Democrat who promised days before the election that President Trump is going to lose and is currently the governor of Pennsylvania. I remember him making that quote. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook poured over $25 million into the administration election in Pennsylvania. Over $10 million went to the Democrat-controlled jurisdiction of Philadelphia, which included $5.5 million on ballot processing equipment and $552,000 for drop boxes. There was a lawsuit in Delaware County which revealed that video evidence of election officials discussing destroying election evidence from the November 2020 election. Because whenever you actually have accurate information, you obviously want to destroy any evidence of that accurate information immediately. It's a felony, one official said, after talking about the need to get rid of voting pads and second scanners. Sources involved in litigation alleged the Delaware County officials violated numerous election laws, and that the destruction of records was done to ensure records eventually provided actually match the election results that were reported in November of 2020. This is craziness. This is craziness. Delaware County received $2.2 million from Zuckerberg's Center for Tech and Civic Life. The election integrity group True the Vote said Philadelphia was the worst offender it witnessed when investigating the widespread ballot trafficking scheme operating across multiple swing states. 1,155 ballot traffickers who each visit at least 10 drop boxes and 5 non-governmental organizations. Some ballot traffickers made hundreds of trips to drop boxes. Unbelievable. It's craziness. Craziness. The most American thing for this election be outsourced. So, did you like the Obama versus Trump bit? What was I talking about? Being on voting rolls, often from filing taxes or receiving Social Security, people who didn't file or move recently would be same-day registration. Okay. It's not supposed to. I mean, the whole concept of same-day registration is so effed up. It's unbelievable. But Arizona. I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to get to Jack Smith with all this. I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to get to Jack Smith. Woo! I will include a link to this doc in my description. In fact, I'll do that now. Link to Arizona was called by 10,000 votes. Maricopa County accepted 20,000. Lavelle Crawford, but all good. I did see it. I was kidding with you. I saw it. A lot of N-word in there. There's a lot of N-word in there. A lot of N-word. A lot. He basically says that, makes the point that Trump was blacker than Obama. in his comedy bit. Maricopa County accepted 20,000 mail-in ballots after Election Day 2020, including 18,000 more than the entire election margin. By law, ballots must be received no later than 7 p.m. on Election Day, which was November 3rd. 20,000 ballots recorded incoming from the USPS on and after November 4th were sufficient quantity to change the results of the 2020 election. Findings were based on Maricopa County's official election department records, which were withheld from public records requests for nearly 7 months. The record showed 18,000 mail-in ballots received on November 4th, 1,000 received on November 5th, and 1,500 received on November 6th. The 18,000 mail-in ballots received on November 4th and subsequently counted represented a significant spike in ballots received, higher than every single day total since October 29, 2020. The receipt of mail-in ballots had steadily declined from 14,000 to 10,000, 6,000. All of a sudden, boom, 18,000 coming the day after the election. Miracle of miracles. It's an election day miracle. A post-election day miracle. In the 2020 election, 420,000 ballots failed signature verification standards. Thus, the election was openly vulnerable to fraud, according to an ongoing analysis conducted by We the People Arizona Alliance. Initial analysis of 380,000 ballots using official state records and official state verification techniques identified 181,000 ballots that should not have been counted, or nearly half of all reviewed. This includes 1,870 blank envelopes, some of which were approved on November 5th and November 8th. 542 with signature other than a voter, 2,100 scribbles, 128 duplicate voters, 48,000 unreasonably different control signatures, 1,800 where the signatures did not match until after the election, 36,000 control signatures that did not match the voter, 4,400 unusable control signatures, 47,000 that failed Secretary of State standards, and 38,000 egregious signature mismatches where not one point of signature matched any on file. So basically a couple 100,000, 380,000 crap ballots in an election that was won by 10,000. All right. In the case of the 1,875 votes, the ballot envelopes did not have signature match on election day, but matching signatures were later put on file for the voter. The findings were presented to the Arizona State Legislature. The number of egregious mismatches found has increased to 76,000, over 7 times the election margin. This is an error rate of 9.3%. Throughout the signature verification analysis, which remains ongoing, analysts have consistently found 20% do not meet Secretary of State standards and 9% are egregious violations. Extrapolated to all 1.9 million mail-in ballots, that's 176,000. See, we now understand how you come up with this number of 176,000. You're extrapolating, which, okay, at least tell us you're extrapolating. I like that they're doing that. This is how you gain legitimacy in your claims. But there should have been up to 176,000. Statistically, there's 176,000 votes that should have been rejected for improper signature match. Maricopa County had no documented chain of custody for 740,000 ballots from the 2020 election. Out of the 923,000 early vote ballots accepted at vote centers drop boxes, only 183,000 ballots are accounted for. By the way, I just want to point out, somehow, this is something I just want to point out. Every time we have all these discrepancies, it's only in somehow the Democrats always seem to win. And then people are like, no, there's cheating on both sides, cheating on both sides. I don't know. Somehow we never get any of these breakdowns of we didn't see any of these breakdowns of issues with voting in the 2016 election. Why not? Why not? What they said was stolen over and over and over again. Over and over again. Unbelievable. Without proper documentation of how many votes were cast at the time they were cast, it's impossible to verify the origin and true total ballots in any given election. Without this count, there's no way to determine if the transport staff retrieved 1 ballot or 1,000 ballots. Proper chain of custody is more than a best practice. It's essential to encouraging trust in our democracy. Millions of files of 2020 general election data and secure logs deleted from the Election Management Service and purged on critical days, including the day before the Arizona audit of 2020 election. Like, that's not completely shady. Oh, yeah, we're about to have an audit. Click. Goodbye. Goodbye. Unbelievable. Two precincts in Pima County had over 100% turnout for mail-in ballots. 40 precincts had over 97% returned. Unbelievable. It's impossible to get over 90%. Impossible. In Australia, there's a law. You're obligated by law to vote. Obligated by law to vote, and they can't reach 95%. Maricopa County Board of Supervisors admitted they purged the system and moved election data after they received the subpoena. Oh, yeah, we did that. And then they complain about Trump moving boxes in his bathroom. National mail-in ballot return rate was 71%, but in Pima County, the mail-in ballot rate was 15% higher. And 90% higher than all the counties combined in the entire state of Arizona. One precinct with 99.5% mail-in turnout had 9,800 ballots counted. Another precinct with 100.6% turnout had 2,000 ballots returned, but only 2,170 mail-ins were ever sent. These two precincts total 11,994 ballots, which alone is more than the margin needed to alter the election. In all, there were 264,000 votes from the precincts in Pima County, with over 92% turned for mail-in ballots. $202 ballot traffickers in Maricopa County who made 4,200 individual Dropbox visits. 2 individuals charged in pleading guilty for ballot harvesting in Yuma County. And Dowreddy, who has received over $2.8 million in grant funding, was previously consulted as a computer expert by the New York Times, Washington Post. He's got, great credentials. He discovered significant and systematic decline in the cumulative ratio as counting progresses in the early mail-in and in-person for the presidential election results in Maricopa. For example, the first block of ballots being 75% for a candidate, the next block of ballots being 74% for a candidate, next block of ballots being 73%, and so on, systematically declining all the way to election date. Dowdy's expert opinion is that the downward sloping line in the sequence of votes recorded indicated strong control. The cumulative ratio of Biden to Trump votes for all cast vote records before election day in recorded order for Pima County declines from over 300% to 157% by election day. Such a uniform, predictable pattern is so statistically implausible that would not occur without artificial manipulation, according to Dowreddy. The data's lack of independence cannot be explained by the preference of Democrats voting earlier than Republicans. Wow. Wow. And that's what helps him come to his conclusion that ballots in Maricopa County and Pima County were artificially processed through tabulators tracking a proportional integral derivative type control function, meaning as votes come in, just the tabulators are just going to turn out what results they want. Finally, Michigan. Michigan was the last one, right? Yeah. Michigan. Michigan was called by 154,188 votes, a record 5.5 million votes were cast in certified Michigan in the 2020 general election, the highest turnout in 60 years. To date, Michigan has never shown 5.579 million voters listed for the 2020 election in qualified voter file, state's database for all voter registration records. As of December 2023, Michigan has 271,000 more votes than the number of voters listed in its qualified voter file for November 3rd, 2020, more than 1.5 times the election margin. This is where I want to see a footnote for. Where's your evidence for this? I want to know how you know this. This is what because I did not see this when I was looking through this stuff. I did not, when they talk about what's a qualified voter file, I don't know what that means, a qualified voter file. I'm curious about this. I want to know what your source is, because this is something which is like, boom, this cannot possibly be. And here's a precise number of 271,566. And I want to know what your source is for this. I just don't see it. In data obtained from the Secretary of State, the qualified voter file was 5,511,000 voters in April 2021. Okay, there you go. There's your source. This means Michigan's own election record showed 68,000 more votes than voters. This doesn't make sense. Tim Vetter, Michigan's voter roll history data manipulation. At least they have a source. That's better than what they had up above. This means Michigan's own election record. The number of voter IDs listed as voting in 2020 has steadily declined since February 2022. As of December 23, there was a total of 5,307,000 voters listed as voting on November 3rd, 2020 in the qualified voter file. Voter history files continue to be removed from the record, resulting in 271,566 less vote history records than necessary to reconcile the results. I don't see. I'm a little confused by this. I'm trying to just figure out what they're saying here. So they go back and they say this was not an actual voter. They go and this is not an actual voter and this is not an actual voter, and they did that for hundreds of thousands of people. Because I remember when I was right after the election in November 2020, before I actually had any sort of social media presence whatsoever. So I spent time looking at vote totals compared to registered voters, because I was very fascinated by the idea as to how it is that in many of these states, which we expected a high turnout because of the ease of mail-in voting under COVID, and because it was a hotly contested election. But you would not expect, one of the things that bothered me, and I'm not done with this, I'm going to come back to it, but I just want to share this thought, okay? when you're trying to figure out a percentage of voters, so I don't care how many residents you have in a state. The only thing that you care about is the number of registered voters. How many votes do we have compared to how many people could possibly vote? The other people who are living in the state and cannot vote, they don't count for purposes of figuring out election integrity. So your only pool is that number of people who are registered to vote on the day of election versus how many votes are actually being tabulated. That's how you figure out an accurate percentage of, okay, what's the voter turnout? Now, we knew coming into this election that certain states would have a higher percentage of people coming out to vote. In a state like with my state, which I currently reside in, New Jersey, the election results were not hotly determined. They were never in doubt. Everyone knew that New Jersey's electoral ballots were going to be cast for Biden. And we knew that years before the 2020 election, right? I mean, everyone knew this. I could have told you, I can tell you right now that in 2032, Jersey's probably going to go blue. Almost certainly. That's just the reality. Now, there's some states that are almost certainly going to go red. So you expect in states that are almost practically predetermined that the voter percentage is going to be lower, because when people feel like their vote doesn't count, they don't bother voting. In battleground states that people figure, hey, this state can really go either way, you expect a higher percentage. Okay, that all makes sense. When we're looking at these battleground states, though, you shouldn't look exclusively at the states that were won by this person versus the ones that are won by a different person. You have to look at ones that coming into the election, people are like, oh, okay, this state can go either way. So 2 states that could have gone either way coming into election day in November 2020 were Florida and Ohio. Those are 2 states that went for Trump. You would think that since they were hotly contested, or expected to be contested, that the percentage of voters should be similar. In many elections, the turnout is like 50%. Of all the people who can vote, only like half of them do. And you talk about a percentage of total voters, moving up a percentage point from 70 to 71, 71 to 72 is very difficult. It's very difficult because from every 100 people, you have to convince that many more you have to convince another 71 instead of the regular 65 to come out. You have to convince another 71 to come out. It's much harder. The closer you get toward 100%, the harder it is to hit that 100%, because a certain number of people are just not going to vote no matter what you do. They hold a gun to their head practically, and they won't vote. And that's why I said in Australia, even though there's a law requiring you to vote, they've never topped 95%. One of the things that bothered me about Wisconsin. So we look at a state like Florida, where you expect a high turnout because it was considered something that was in doubt back in 2020. Look at Ohio, a battleground state. Yeah, you know that in Ohio they had a record high turnout. A record high turnout of 74%. They never topped, I think, 70% ever. They got all the way up to 74%. That was considered a crazy high percentage. To go from 74 to 75 is so difficult. You need to push people and push people and push people and push people just to move up 1 percentage points, 2%. Moving up 3 points is like impossible. It's so difficult to change that number when you're talking about this pool of people and increasing percentage-wise the number of people who will vote, which is why I said anyone who got over 80%, how are they 6 points higher than Ohio? It makes no sense. And especially it's the state right next door. You got Ohio, you got Michigan, they're right next to each other. And like the next thing, how is this happening? And Michigan, when I looked at it, I believe their voter turnout rate, I was like, if I see 80%, I know there's something funky going on. Michigan came in at 84% of their registered voters. And Wisconsin was over 90%. That is impossible. It's not possible. It's just not. And that's why I said those are 2 states that I'll tell you another state no one ever talks about, which was crazy high, New Hampshire. I'm fairly certain. And then whenever I throw these numbers out, people are like, what are you talking about, Joe? There's 9 million people living in this state, and they only got 5,600,000 votes. I'm like, no. Don't talk to me about the number of people living in the state. No one's talking about the number of people living in the state. We're talking about registered voters. I don't care about how many people are living in the state. If you decide to move in there an extra 12 million children who are all under the age of 18, that's not part of percentage of the state. No one cares about that. They only care about registered voters. That's all that matters. Anyway. So I looked at Michigan, and Michigan, as I recall, was like 84%. Now that was like shortly after the election, like a day after election. Maybe more votes came in, and so it would have gone up to 86% or 87%. I don't know how it is that we got to over 100%. That doesn't make sense. Each month vote. So what did they take people off the list of who was eligible? Hey, here's someone from X. Look at that. An X talker. I was surprised at how many people are watching me on X. I was surprised at how many people saw my X. I am streaming to X. I am curious. Ooh, look at this. How many people? I'm able to see how many people are watching me on X specifically. Let me see that. I'm curious if I can see that information. Yeah, I don't understand. It says I got 10 viewers on X. But then later on, I'm going to see like that it was seen by 2,000 people. So I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand how X calculates stuff. All right. Hey, you see, you're on X also. A little X by your face. All right. Still not sure why I stream to X. I try to figure that out. I'm like, why am I doing this? Is this beneficial? Each month, voter histories from 2020 election are being manipulated. Thousands of unique votes are removed from the voter history files and other unique votes added. Since December 2020, 270,000 voter histories for 2020 have been removed, while 103,000 have been added. Something really weird going on in that state. Individual voter histories are constantly changing, including the history of state's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, whose voting history is missing votes through 2020. A complete list of voters was requested via a FOIA request. It took 9 months for the state to fill. 2 data sets were provided, neither matched. First data set fell 22,000 votes short, while the second data set was 120,000 absentee ballots short. Democrats threatened Republicans on the Wayne County Board of Canvassers and doxed children in order to certify the 2020 election results. What? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'll start my free trial. Dagnabbit. Monica Palmer, then the chair of Wayne County Board of Supervisors, cited the fact that 70% of Detroit's mail-in ballot counts were still out of balance and unexplained from the August primary as a reason why she initially voted against certifying the 2020 election results. Palmer was bullied and threatened and feared for her safety. I remember this. Due to the threats she received for voting no. A Democrat Michigan state representative-elect attacked Palmer over a certification vote and revealed where her children went to school, saying, I want you to think about what that means for your kids. Oh, this I remember. What a terrible human being. Officials in Detroit illegally blocked Republican poll challengers' access, covered the windows, called the cops, denied lawful challenges. I remember those videos of them blocking the windows. Affidavits and video evidence revealed thousands of ballots were delivered through a back door at the TCF Center's central counting facility in Detroit. At 3:30 a.m., a report seeking to debunk issues of fraud released by Michigan State Senate Oversight Committee confirmed a large volume of ballots were delivered to CCF Center with no chain of custody in the middle of the night. An estimated 289,000 absentee ballots were identified as sent to people who never requested them, something that would be illegal, according to the Senate committee. Zuckerberg gave Michigan $16.8 million through his nonprofit Center for Tech and Civic Life. Detroit received $7.4 million to dramatically expand the vote for Democrats. Grants financed drop boxes. Election integrity group True the Vote uncovered the same pattern of widespread ballot trafficking. And how much we got going on there? Numerous instances of ballot stuffing were caught on camera in Detroit, including video where a woman can be seen going to a drop box and abruptly returning to her car after realizing the stack had no signatures. The woman then signs the ballots and deposits the illicit ballots she had just signed into the drop box. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson made unlawful changes to signature verification rules for absentee ballots, ordering election workers to presume all were legitimate. A judge ruled Benson's order invalid, but not until months following the election, and just 0.1% of mail-in ballots were rejected. The rejection rate for mismatching signatures was just 0.04%, as only 1,400 out of 3.4 million ballots were rejected. It's astonishing. Secretary Benson had lost in court 6 times for issues related to the 2020 election. 6 losses because of how much crap was going on in Michigan. Fraudulent voter registration scheme was discovered in October 2020 and documented a police report in Muskegon County and hidden for nearly 3 years after the 2020 election. A city clerk in Muskegon witnessed a woman drop off between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registrations at the clerk's office on October 8, 2020, many appearing to be fraudulent. Incident was reported to the Muskegon Police Department 1 week later. 8,000 new voter registrations in Muskegon would amount to over 20% of the city's population of only 38,000 residents. An ensuing investigation confirmed thousands of voter registrations in the same handwriting and many invalid or non-existent addresses. They're basically stealing ballots to fill them out. Suspect told Michigan State Police she's being paid $1,100 per week to find, quote, find unregistered voters and provide them with a form so they can get registered to vote. No, she managed to find them. They all happen to have her signature. A Department of State analyst consulted in the investigation confirmed the quantity of voter applications were clearly fraudulent and others were highly suspicious, having either erroneous or missing key pieces of information. Organization behind the scheme was GBI Strategies, a firm hired by numerous Democrat companies. GBI Strategies was funded by a super PAC called Black PAC, which paid the firm $11 million to register voters for Joe Biden in 2020. GBI Strategies believed to be operating not just in Muskegon, but throughout Michigan and other swing states. Democrat Attorney General Dana Nessel's office contacted the Muskegon Police Department and asked Michigan State Police to assist with a joint investigation. Michigan Police then turned the investigation over to the FBI. Andrew Kloster, Deputy General Counsel at United States Office of Personnel Management during the Trump administration, said he was made aware of the investigation into GBI Strategies before 2020 and attempted to raise the issue for further investigation. He was informed there were standing orders not to deal with election matters in the offices of White House Counsel Office and Attorney General Bill Barr. That investigation was not made public until 2023 after police reports were obtained through FOIA requests. Wow. Very comprehensive report. Very comprehensive report. All right. Any questions? Did we cover everything? That's crazy. Yeah, I had him on here a long time ago, Rich Barris. He's a friend of mine. I mean, not like I haven't spoken to him in like a year or two. I used to appear on People's Pundit occasionally also. We just sort of fell out of touch. But it's a good suggestion. The files given to election campaigns for use in their internal database of Canada. In Canada, files not public, and you can be jailed if you release it. FYI, website vote records, YouTube really doesn't like. Oh. That's it, voterecords.org or .com or something like that. Voter records? Voter records. If I remember an article correctly that I read a few years ago, LA County has 105% registered voters over total population. So stupid. It's so stupid. It's like they don't even pretend that there's any legitimacy here. All right. I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to start. It's 11:50. 11:52. Whether or not I want to start on the Jack Smith thing. I'm torn. I said I was going to cover Jack Smith and the claims that he doesn't have legitimacy. Maybe we'll start it and we'll see how far we get. Maybe we'll do that. So this is exhausting doing this. Not going to kid you. It's exhausting. Yes, do it. Yeah, it's very easy for you to just type out the words, yes, do it. Yes, do it, Joe. Oh, Joe, stop being so lazy, Joe. All right. There we go. Amicus brief. Certified. I will tell you this. I need to find out whether the oral arguments, which are supposed to be next week on January 9th, which is a week from yesterday, it's going to be next Tuesday. If they are being live streamed, I do plan on airing that and covering it live. I just don't know whether or not Federal Circuit Court is live streams their stuff on this. This amicus brief I have right here. Amicus is Latin term for friend of the court. From amici. And it's written by Edwin Meese, former Attorney General, law professor Stephen Calabrese, and Gary S. Lawson, two based individuals. So their question presented is whether private citizen Jack Smith lacks authority to represent the United States, which jurisdictional requirement must exist in all states of litigation and which cannot be waived in filing his petition for writ of certiorari in this court. All right, here we go. Yes. You're correct. They don't live stream trials, but oral arguments are shared with the public. They don't record them or share them publicly ever. They're trials. That's correct. However, Supreme Court itself will record oral arguments and make them available. So I don't know whether the DC Circuit Court is going to make that available or not. Get a drink first. I've got my coffee here. A lot of arguments relate to that topic. All right. Scrolling on down. We don't care about this. Don't care about that. Don't care about this. Don't care about that. Not your rules. We don't need your stinking rules. All right. Introduction and interest of amici. Some people pronounce it amici. Some call it amici. Some call it a Mickey. Those are the three different ways I've heard that word pronounced. Should we see what? Let's see how they want to pronounce it. When I get to chill doing stuff like this. Hello? I don't hear nothing.
It is an iPhone game, or your amici or something. And that's why you can express your amici or something. Ocarina is an iPhone game, and you can, or a musical instrument you play on your iPhone. You blow.
Amici Hayek, speech pathology and audiology.
Amici.
Shannon Ho, speech pathology.
Amici?
Benvenuti, amici. Yeah.
Amici.
All right.
Lo dican detto ai dolci amici addio, e
Amici.
che rinnovo peregrin d'amore punge.
Your year when it might be too late. An important step to their futures. And according to instructor Anna Amici, interest becomes
That's a name. That doesn't mean nothing. All right. You see? No one can agree. Probably depends whether you're talking in like Latin or like / Roman versus Spanish versus whatever. All right. The court should reject Mr. Smith's request for certiorari before judgment for the simple reason that he lacks authority to ask for it. Nor does he have authority to conduct the underlying prosecution. Those actions can be taken only by persons properly appointed as federal officers to properly created federal offices. So you have to be the right person in a position that actually exists, which we don't have a right person here for a position that doesn't exist. Neither Smith nor the position of special counsel under which he reportedly acts meets those criteria. And that's a serious problem for the American rule of law, whatever one may think of the defendant or the conduct at issue in the underlying prosecution. And here's the thing, you can't just decide to do whatever you want and everyone just says, oh, okay, well, this guy's coming along. What's your basis of your authority to do this? The illegality addressed in this brief started in November 18, 2022, when Attorney General Merrick Garland exceeded his statutory and constitutional authority by purporting to appoint Smith to serve as special counsel for the DOJ. So this is really the key here, if you want to just get the brief synopsis, is the head of the DOJ cannot just make someone special counsel. This is it. There's no authority. There's no law which enables him to do it. Special counsel has powers, and the DOJ can't just give someone those powers, particularly if they're a private citizen. Smith was appointed to conduct the ongoing investigation into whether any person or entity, including Trump, violated the law in connection with efforts to interfere with the lawful transfer of power in 2020 presidential election or certification electoral college vote held on January 6. Garland cited as statutory authority for this appointment was 28 U.S.C. 509, 510, 515, and 533. But none of those statutes, nor any other statutory constitutional provisions, remotely authorized the appointment by the Attorney General, meaning he doesn't have that power under those statutes, to appoint a private citizen to receive extraordinary criminal law enforcement power under the title of special counsel. First, the appointments clause. How do people get their power? Well, that's under the Constitution. We have an appointments clause that requires that all federal offices, not because it's an executive agency, right? You're sitting there, you're executing on behalf of the government, not otherwise provided for in the Constitution, must be established by law. So that's Article 2 of the Constitution. And there is no statute establishing the offices of special counsel in the DOJ. The statutory provisions relied upon by DOJ and lower courts for the appointment of special counsels over the past half century do not authorize the creation and appointment of special counsels at the level of United States attorneys. So, I mean, the term special counsel is a weird term. There have been several special counsel, that were created, positions that existed beforehand. And in this brief, these learned individuals are going to distinguish between which ones actually seemingly had authority and which ones seemingly don't, including Jack Smith. So one of them is United States v. Nixon. The case of the United States v. Nixon does not hold to the contrary because no question was ever raised in that case about the validity of the independent counsel's appointment. So in Nixon case, no one raised the issue. That case concerned the relationship between the president and DOJ as an institution, not between the president and any specific actor purportedly appointed by the DOJ. Second, even if one overlooks the absence of statutory authority for the position, meaning this position doesn't exist under the law, there's no statute specifically authorizing the Attorney General rather than the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to appoint such special counsels. So you could have a situation where theoretically the president could appoint someone to a position and then the Senate would confirm that person there. But that's not what happened here. Under the Appointments Clause, inferior officers can be appointed by department heads only if Congress so directs by statute. So if you have an inferior officer, a lower level rather than a superior officer, that the DOJ can do that. But first, the DOJ and Garland has to be empowered to do that by Congress. Congress has to say, we are hereby vesting in the head of the DOJ the authority to create a special counsel. That's how he would then be deigned, that he could lay his hands on Jack Smith and say, I hereby deem you to be special counsel. But he doesn't have the power to do that unless there's that statute that's passed by Congress. And so directs specifically enough to overcome a clear statement presumption in favor of presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation. Because the fallback we start with is if someone is going to become an officer, that has to be president picks him, designates him, Senate confirms him. That's the way. Not the DOJ. Merrick Garland doesn't have no special powers to make someone, I hereby deem you special counsel. If he wants to have those powers, there has to be a statute. Otherwise, the default is president has to designate this person, and then it's not simply the president, there has to be confirmation through Congress. No such statute exists for a special counsel. Third, special counsel is a valid office if a valid officer is superior rather than an inferior officer. So that's how it would work for an inferior officer, and thus cannot be appointed by any means other than presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation, regardless of what states purport to say. So what they're saying now is, if you call, how are we classifying this special counsel? Are we considering them an inferior officer or a superior officer? If they're an inferior officer, then if they're labeled that, which is different qualifications for inferior versus superior. If we're going to label them that, then you have two means of doing that. You could either have appointment by the president or a statute by Congress. So if you're going to call him an inferior officer, so in that case, you don't need the president to do it. You could be a statute. The problem is you don't have a statute. If you call him a superior officer, in that case, you don't even have the second alternative. You can't have some statute by Congress. The only way that can happen is if he's designated by the president and then confirmed in the Senate. This is true as a matter of original meaning, and this is true as a matter of case law. Once one understands that neither Morrison v. Olson nor Edmund v. U.S. can plausibly be read to say that any person who is in any fashion subordinate to another executive official other than the president is an inferior officer. Such a reading of those decisions leads to a ludicrous result that there's only one non-inferior officer in every executive department. To be sure, there are times when the appointment of a special counsel is appropriate. So we're not saying there's no such thing that you can have a special counsel. There are. And statutes and Constitution both provide ample means of such appointments by allowing the use of existing U.S. attorneys. Any number of U.S. attorneys have performed with distinction the function of serving as special counsel. For example, December 30th, 2003, Patrick Fitzgerald, who was then the U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, was lawfully appointed by then acting Attorney General to investigate the Valerie Plame leak affair, which arose within the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia District Court. Fitzgerald, the special prosecutor, who was a Senate-confirmed officer in the United States, prosecuted and secured the conviction of Vice President Richard Cheney's Chief of Staff, Scooter Libby, in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. So, yeah. But there, they took someone who was already a U.S. attorney. In order to become a U.S. attorney, there had to be a confirmation process. Other recent examples involve Senate-confirmed U.S. attorneys Rod Rosenstein, John Huber, and John Durham. All of those investigation prosecutions of high-level wrongdoing were lawful. You can have a valid special prosecutor. What federal statutes and the Constitution do not allow, however, is for the Attorney General to appoint a private citizen who has never been confirmed by the Senate as a substitute United States attorney under the title Special Counsel. Well, you were never really confirmed, but yeah, I'm calling you Special Counsel. I'm making you really, really powerful and holy because I said so. That is what happened on November 18, 2022. That appointment was unlawful, as are all the legal actions that have flowed from it, including Citizen Smith's current attempt to obtain a ruling from this court. Can't do it. You have no authority. You can't act for the United States. He's basically saying, imagine if you say, hey, I'm going to go to court and I'm going to sue, and I'm going to sue United States versus Biden. Where's your authority for that? You don't have the authority. Neither does Jack Smith. That's the point of this brief. Given their interest in the rule of law, the legal issue addressed in this brief is particular importance to Amici. The Honorable Edward Meese III served as the 75th Attorney General of the United States after having served as counselor to the president, is now the Ronald Reagan Distinguished Fellow Emeritus at the Heritage Foundation. During his tenure as AG, the DOJ steadfastly defended proper limits on federal power. For their part, Professors Calabresi and Lawson, they're pretty spectacular too. They're scholars of the original public meaning. What's the proof that they're scholars? Well, Supreme Court seems to trust them. They seem to cite them. United States versus Vallejo, Madreo, Justice Thomas cited Calabresi. He's like, you know what? I think Calabresi makes a lot of sense. Justice Gorsuch cited Lawson. So these are not like just knuckleheads like Baud and Polson, who woke up one day and said, I'm going to write a law review article and then everyone's going to consider me a scholar. No, these are people who actually Supreme Court justices have cited saying, I've read what Lawson says and I agree with him. Reasons for denying the petition. In our constitutional system, Congress alone has authority to create federal offices not established by the Constitution. The AG cannot fashion offices as he sees fit, nor has Congress given the AG power to appoint a special counsel of this nature. So, without legal office, Smith cannot wield the authority of the United States, including his present attempt to seek relief in this court. You just can't come in there and say, I'm the United States. Only Congress can create a federal office. The Constitution itself creates no executive positions other than presidency, vice presidency, if one considers that an executive position, which is sort of so-so. Instead, the Constitution commits the power to create federal offices to Congress under the necessary and proper clause, which gives Congress power to make all laws which are necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by the Constitution in the government of the United States or any other department of office thereof. A law creating offices to carry out executive functions is the quintessential law necessary and proper for carrying into execution federal powers. You can't just start doing stuff. You need a law passed which gives you the throne. You need to be holding the staff. You need Congress to hand you the staff of power. The staff of silence. Silence, everyone. Silence. I'm holding the staff. Moreover, Congress has the exclusive constitutional power to create federal offices. Citing themselves. Stephen J. Calabresi and Gary Lawson, why Robert Mueller's appointment as special counsel was unlawful. English monarchs could create offices, but the founders considered the power abusive and consciously denied it. Why is it we give this power to Congress? We want to have separation of powers. Offices are created by Congress. They figure out what offices there are, and then they're filled by the president. Accordingly, the Constitution does not give the president or the heads of executive departments the power to create any offices and to appoint any officers they deem appropriate. So, Merrick Garland, he's part of the executive branch. He cannot create an office. That must be created by Congress. Instead, it requires that Congress first create all offices to which federal officers, superior or inferior, can be appointed. This is confirmed by the Appointments Clause, which provides for this appointment of officers which shall be established by law. The addition of the emphasized phrase, the Appointments Clause, was deliberate. On September 15, 1787, after officers of the U.S. whose appointments are not otherwise provided for were added the words, and which shall be established by law. This addition's plain import is that why did they throw that in there? Was to establish that the office must be a statute, a regulation, or executive or order is not the kind of law that can create an office under the Appointments Clause. Indeed, the Constitution consistently uses terms law and laws, as brought down by Gary Lawson. So if there's no statute establishing an office, there's no office to which someone can be appointed. And there is no statute, so no one can be appointed. Wong wong. The organic statutes of the Department of Justice do not by law vest in the AG the power to appoint officers with the power of supposed special counsel Smith. The DOJ's current structure, as provided by statute, includes an AG. So there is a statute which creates the DOJ, right? We have Department of Justice. How do we have Department of Justice? That's by statute. And it creates an attorney general, deputy attorney general, associate, blah, blah, 11 assistant attorney generals, a whole bunch of folks, one U.S. attorney for each judicial district, which there's 94 of those, a director of the FBI, a director of the U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Marshals, blah, 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 all these different positions. This list does not include more than 100,000 people who work for the DOJ. So you might say, wait, there's a lot of people who work for the DOJ whose jobs are not listed therein. So he's just another person who works for the DOJ. Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? There's 100,000 people who work there. They're not listed. But the vast majority of federal workers, including those who work at the DOJ, are not considered officers of the United States. Somebody who works as a secretary, somebody who works as some clerk who's looking up, doing research, they're not considered officers of the United States. They're hired by the United States, but they're not officers of the United States. These are employees whose appointments are not controlled by the Appointments Clause and who therefore do not require specific statutory authority. For their appointments, it suffices to provide, as Congress has done, that each executive agency, its military department, government, can employ such number of employees of the various classes recognized by Chapter 51 as title may appropriate from year to year. And employees cannot exercise the power of officers. There's different levels of authority. So if they decide to hire someone to be a clerk, you can't just make that person a prosecutor. To be sure, the Ethics in Government Act of 1978 added to the mix an independent counsel. So there is an act. Here's your statute. This is what they're trying to hang their hat on. That there's the Ethics in Government Act of 1978, which adds an independent counsel appointed by a special 3-judge court upon referral by the AG. But the statutory provisions of the independent counsel expired in 1999 when Congress failed to reauthorize them. Whoops. Shortly before that expiration, then Attorney General Janet Reno promulgated regulations which, if valid, so the AG, Janet Reno, she starts issuing these regulations. And she comes up with this thing providing for an office of special counsel. If her promulgations are still valid, which, okay, that's a question that they're going to address. In that case, that would provide for an office of special counsel. I'm going to call these the Reno regulations. Under these regulations, the AG may, in some circumstances, appoint an outside special counsel to assume responsibility for the matter. So these are the Reno regulations, which it seems like perhaps that's what Merrick Garland is relying on, the Reno regulations. Whether she had the authority to issue these regulations, that's a question. But let's assume for the moment that she does have that authority. The regulations clarify that outside counsel means someone from outside the United States government. The Reno regulations, like the independent counsel statute, contemplate appointment as a putative inferior officer of a non-governmental office to an office that is fully the equivalent of the United States attorney. But regulations are not the kind of law that can establish a federal office. Only a statute can do that under the Appointments Clause, and no statute creates a special counsel with the jurisdiction authority Smith wields. So the Reno regulations, where did she come up with that? She relied on 5 U.S.C. 301 and 28 U.S.C. 509, 510, 515 through 519. In his order, appointing Smith, Attorney General, similarly went to 509, 510, 515, and 533. But these statutes singly or collectively Don't give him that authority. Start with 5 U.S.C. 301, which is the first one they mentioned here. This provision is generally authorization for the issuance of regulations by the AG or any other department head. The head of the executive department or military department may prescribe. I don't want to even get into this because that's really the Reno regulations, and Smith didn't really cite that. He only cited 28 U.S.C. 509, 510, 515 through 519. But they're saying that 5 U.S.C. is just a housekeeping provision. It's got nothing to do with making new jobs, creating new offices. 509 of Title 28 merely says that all functions of other officers of the DOJ and all functions are vested in the Attorney General. So that's just saying what the functions of, that's just saying the AG in the DOJ can do whatever the hell he wants within the metes and bounds of his office. But this provision doesn't give him the authorized to create a new office. It just means he can do whatever he wants within the office. That he can control his subordinates in DOJ. That's all it says. 509. 510, similarly, says the AG can, from time to time, make such provisions as he considers appropriate, authorizing performance by any other officer, employer, agency, or department of any function of the AG. Statute provides for shifting authority among the persons who work at DOJ, but it says nothing about who the persons are or how they got there. So Garland also cited 28 U.S.C. 515, much like the Reno regulations, but they confer only the following power: that any other officer of the DOJ may, when specifically directed by the AG, conduct any kind of legal proceeding, civil or criminal, including grand jury proceedings. Well, that sounds like it's on target. That seems consistent with where he's coming from. But 515 does not create any offices or authorize their creation. Instead, it concerns the powers of people who have been properly appointed to officers under law pursuant to other statutory provisions. It means if you have other statutory provisions, that's what gives him the authority to wield them. The AG, the authority to basically designate them towards various individuals who are already accepted. It allows the Attorney General to designate a U.S. attorney or special attorney appointed under law to prosecute a case, even if he's not a resident of the district in which the proceeding is brought. So it's a geographical and jurisdictional allocated provision, saying you don't have to be living there, you don't have to have the jurisdiction to serve there, and you still can come in there and do the job that's designated by the AG, but not to do some brand new job that the AG is not allowed to do. It's not a grant of power to appoint private citizens as special counsels. So that's how it was this clause that allowed AG to appoint Patrick Fitzgerald to go look in the Valley Plain matter. Each attorney specifically retained under authority of the DOJ shall be commissioned as a special assistant to the AG or special attorney and shall take the oath required by law. Foreign counsel employed in special cases are not required to take the oath. But this subsection is not granting new power to retain or hire new officers. It simply enables him to say that attorneys who have already been hired or retained and who may be only employees, not officers, can also have a title and salary. So and whether you go to 515A, 515B, those provisions confer no authority to create offices. Likewise, 516 through 519 is again internal allegation of authority among existing DOJ personnel. No authority to create offices, and no authority that once you create those offices, take a private citizen and shove him into that newly created office. Section 519 points to the correct answer regarding the AG's statutory authority to appoint special counsels. Section 519 notes that there are special attorneys appointed under Section 543 of this title. Yet, neither the RENA regulations nor the Garland memo appointing Smith makes any mention of this provision. Why don't they mention 543? It seems to be so helpful. Why wouldn't they mention that? Oh, because 543 doesn't authorize the kind of special counsel contemplated by the RENA regulations or the Garland's appointment. Because you know what 543 deals with? Why they never deal with it? Oh, because 543 specifically deals with including the appointment of qualified tribal prosecutors and other qualified attorneys to assist in prosecuting federal offenses committed in Indian country. That's what 543 is for. Indian country. Indian country. That's why they don't bother. They're like, 543 is not going to help us. That's the only area where potentially you could have a special counsel is Indian country. That's where you have a law which enables you to have special assistants or special counsels who merely assist U.S. attorneys when the public interest so requires. The problem for the government in the case of RENA regulation, the Smith appointment, is that those regulations and the Smith appointment order do not contemplate special counsels who assist U.S. attorneys. Instead, they contemplate special counsels who replace U.S. attorneys. Smith, for example, was not appointed to assist U.S. attorneys. Who's he assisting? He's off on his own doing his own damn thing. He was hired as a powerful standalone officer, replacing rather than assisting. This is precisely the role that the Ethics in Government Act authorized for independent counsels, but the statute no longer exists. You can't have an independent counsel anymore. In the absence of the statute, a similar one, there's simply no statutory authority for a special counsel. It's made up. The remainder of Title 28 confirms this conclusion. Section 533, relied upon by Attorney General Garland, is part of a chapter dealing with the FBI and is entitled to investigate and other officials. It says the AG may appoint officials to detect and prosecute crimes against the U.S. Okay. To assist in the protection of the president, et cetera, et cetera. But 533 is not general authorization to the AG to appoint officers. It specifically and solely authorizes the appointment of investigative and other officials. Officials, not officers. Officials, not officers. So basically, you can have a PI. You can have a private investigator. That's what he's allowed to do. Garland can hire a private investigator under this statute. Not get some freaking prosecutor to start running off and doing his own standalone investigation and prosecuting, saying, hey, this is the United States coming after this guy. This does not include, and those are officials, officers are connected with the FBI. That doesn't include special counsels. This is clear for three reasons. Why doesn't this work? For three reasons. First, it's part of Chapter 33 of Title 28, which deals with the FBI. So this is all about doing investigation, not about prosecuting. So that section is dealing with the FBI, which obviously the FBI is all about investigation. And that's why it's dealing with FBI officials and agents, not special counsels. Second, 533 concerns the appointment of investigative and prosecutorial officials. Such officials, as that term is used in the statute, are not Article 2 officers of the United States. In order to prosecute, you need to be an Article 2 officer. They're non-officer employees, just like the janitors, who, as FBI agents, must be subject to the supervision and direction of officers. They can't be flying off doing their own thing. They have to be under an officer. But that's not what Smith is. Smith is not under anybody. The FBI needs office and field personnel to perform its functions, and 533 allows the agency to have them. But those office and field personnel are not officers of the United States, and they don't have the range of power as special counsel. This is a really great brief. I got to tell you, this is a powerful brief. To the contrary, the word officer is a constitutional term of art, not only because it's used that way in the Appointments Clause, but also because Article 2 allows the impeachment and removal of civil officers. Can you impeach someone who's not a civil officer? Probably not. You can't impeach someone who's a clerk. Congress can try to impeach the Deputy Attorney General, the FBI Director, but no one thinks Congress can impeach DOJ trial attorneys, Office of Legal Counsel, attorney advisors, or field personnel in the FBI. You can't impeach someone who's working as an undercover agent for the FBI. He's not impeachable. He's not an officer. What's more, officers can be put by Congress in the line of succession to the presidency. But no one thinks investigative officials, the FBI, DOJ trial attorneys, who are basically bureaucrats and employees, can be part of the line of succession, so that if a designated survivor, that they be the guy. That's not how it works. They're not an officer. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. That's simply not how Congress was used to term officials in 533. Third, and perhaps most tellingly, a cavalier reading in 533 to authorize hiring beyond its obvious scope obliterates the careful structure of Title 28, which has all these chapters dealing with Attorney General, FBI, U.S. attorneys, etc., etc. Wide-ranging special counsels of the sort represented by Smith are not part of these provisions outside of the now defunct Ethics Government Act. At a more granular level, the effect of a loose reading of statutes is even more bizarre. Congress, as noted earlier, has provided for the appointment all with presidential nomination and senatorial consent of a deputy AG. So if you read 533 to create essentially unlimited inferior office appointment power of the AG, it wreaks havoc on the structure. Basically, he can give someone powers that he himself doesn't have. You can have an entire shadow DOJ to replace the functions of every statutorily specified officer. No wonder the RINA regulations did not invoke it. For reasons described in the depth in Calabresi and Lawson, the court in U.S. v. Nixon did not pass on the scope of 533. That decision contains some ill-considered dictum regarding 533. Anyone tempted to rely on Nixon should read the case briefs to see what issues were truly raised there. Those issues involved only the relationship, because this is what they're expecting. They're expecting Merrick Garland to cite back to U.S. v. Nixon. So they're preemptively striking, because U.S. v. Nixon clearly does not stand in agreement with what's being offered here in this Amici brief. But they're basically saying that Nixon never really raised these issues at all. Those issues involve only the relationship between the president and the DOJ as an institution. The same arguments would have been raised if the AG personally, rather than the independent counsel, had brought the suit at issue there. Moreover, Nixon was argued and decided before the modern rebirth of separation of powers, which dates from 2 years after Nixon and Buckley v. Vallejo. In short, the position supposedly held by Smith was not established by law. The authority exercised by him as a so-called special counsel exceeds the power exercisable by a mere employee. So he's not an officer, he's an employee, and the powers that were vested in him far exceed those that can be given to an employee. And that alone robs him of authority to represent the United States in any capacity, including before this court. Next. Before I get there, let me see what you guys are saying. What is really exhausting is that people have to put in this much effort to get to the truth. So sad what the news has become. Your show is great. Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Brittany, this is off topic, but did you see the man attack a judge in court today in my lovely state of Nevada? Insane. No, I did not. I don't know anything about what you're talking about. Not kidding you. But sadly, few things shock me. Few things will make me say shocking in any kind of serious capacity. So attacking and judging is pathetic. Little did they know, all the ballot boxes have been built on top of old Indian fence. Hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah. That's pretty funny stuff. That's pretty funny stuff, my friend. That's the authority, because they're going after Trump for what he did on Indian burial grounds. We saw him dancing around in his underwear. He was sitting there whooping. Maybe that's better than any statutory authority they got. All right. The appointment clause establishes a default rule that all heads of departments and officers, they need Senate confirmation, presidential nomination, and Senate confirmation, and then presidential appointment. So it's a 3-step process. First, the president nominates, then the Senate confirms, and then the president says, you're hereby appointed. Even if one somehow thinks that existing statutes authorize appointment of a standalone special counsel, let's just say there is such a thing. Let's pretend for a moment there is such a thing. Smith was not properly appointed to such an office. And you know why? You can ask yourself, why didn't they do this? Why did they not do this? You want to know why? Do you want to know why? The reason they did not do this is because it would look so partisanly political for Biden to nominate someone to go after Trump. That's why they didn't do it that way. That's why they're like, oh, it's completely removed. It has nothing to do with Biden. This is just Merrick Garland randomly trying to enforce justice on his own. No statute clearly authorized his appointment by any mode other than presidential appointment and Senate confirmation. I have to tell you something, by the way. If these charges fall apart because Smith is not properly appointed, how friggin' hilarious would that be? Oh my God. So friggin' hilarious. Like if this Amici brief actually holds up and the DC Circuit Court is like, yeah, what the hell's happening here? Why is Jack Smith here? He's got no authority. That would be hilarious. Hilarious. Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. What egg on his face. What egg on his face if this Amici brief holds up. Oh my God, that'd be amazing. That'd be better than anything. DC Circuit Court coming back and saying, yeah, why the hell is he here? That makes no sense. How did he get here? Who is this guy? Why doesn't he ever trim his beard? It's like so wild and uncontrolled. I feel like the dude just popped into court after being like the star of Naked and Alone or whatever that stupid wilderness show is. What's it called? I don't know. Something like that. Any such statute of course, is governed by the Appointments Clause of Article 2, which provides that the president shall appoint ambassadors, other blah, blah, blah. And all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for should be established by law. But the Congress may, by law, vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper. This sentence makes 3 things clear. First, the default mode of appointment for all officers, superior or inferior, is presidential nomination, Senate confirmation, and then presidential appointment. First comes the nomination, confirmation, appointment. President, Congress in the middle. That's default. Second, this default presumption can only be overridden by Congress in the case of inferior officers. They have no right with respect to superior officers, but they can pass laws for inferior officers. Third, even in the case of inferior officers, Congress must speak clearly to authorize permissible mode of appointment for those officers other than presidential nomination, Senate confirmation, and presidential appointment. So if Congress wants to make some other way around it, they got to be really clear as to how that happens for the inferior officers. This latter clear statement rule is implicit in the Appointments Clause in the constitutional structure. That clause is both a separation of powers and a federalism provision. It divides appointment power between the president and the Senate, not between the president and Congress as a whole. So which lacks power to confirm appointees. The House has nothing to do with confirmation. The Senate is the body in which states receives equal representation, which whatever their size of population, which guards against large state presidents underrepresenting smaller state ones in the executive and judicial departments. Ah, that's why it's the Senate. Smart. Otherwise, you might stuff it with Californians and New Yorkers. As one convention participant put it, presidential appointment power without the check of the Senate would allow presidents to gain over the larger states by gratifying them with preference to their citizens. These structural concerns warrant an interpretive presumption in favor of a clear statement of congressional intent to authorize appointment of an inferior officer by any means other than President, Senate, President. Even without such a presumption, ordinary statutory interpretation demonstrates that the AG received no power to appoint special counsels as inferior officers. Who says you can call someone a special counsel an inferior officer? Let's look back again at this statute here as to we talk about inferior officer. Section 2 says, the president shall appoint ambassadors, public ministers, counsels, judges, Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. The Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper. So these seem like the superior ones. Officers of the United States, you would think that's superior officers. Were such inferior ones as, so we're trying to figure out where does the special counsel fall in. So even without such presumption, ordinary statutory interpretation demonstrates the AG received no power to appoint special counsels as inferior officers. None of the statutes canvassed in the previous section contains any such authorization. In contrast to the DOJ's organic statutes, the organic statutes of the agriculture, blah, 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 these other agencies do contain inferior officer appointment power clauses. So when they created the Department of Agriculture, they said, oh, and here are your inferior officers. When they had the Department of Health, here are your inferior officers. Thus, the Agriculture Secretary may appoint such officers, employees, and such experts as are necessary to execute their functions. Similarly, the education of secretary authorized, I think it's Secretary of Education. Such officers and employees, including attorneys, Health and Human Services Secretary authorized to appoint officers. And Congress gave the AG power to appoint such additional officers and employees as he deems necessary, but specifically for the Bureau of Prisons, not more broadly for other DOJ. That's his limitation. You want to make a warden? Go for it. You want to make a special prosecutor? You don't have that authority. There's no statute saying that. It's unclear why Congress chose to give general inferior officer appointment power to the aforementioned secretaries, but not the AG. I mean, why didn't they do it? Why did that happen? I don't know. It may be because unique threats to an unwise attorney general could pose civil liberties, separation of powers, and federalism. But this court need not divine Congress' reasons for making different political policy choices because relevant statutes are unambiguous. There's nothing to even argue about. It's pretty clear. So he clearly doesn't have the authority to make someone an inferior officer. All they can do is make a warden for the Bureau of Prisons. That's all the DOJ can do. I didn't know they could do that even. I guess so. Even if special counsels were statutorily authorized, meaning if they invented some statute, which does not exist, but if such a statute did exist, they would be superior officers who would need presidential appointment and Senate confirmation. They're not inferior officers, they're superior officers. This is an interesting argument. If he had the power to convene grand juries, issue subpoenas, direct and conduct prosecutions, and file appeals to the Supreme Court, he would obviously be an officer of the United States rather than a mere employee. More than that, he would be a superior or principal officer. And by the plain terms of the Appointments Clause, superior officers must be appointed by the president with the Senate's advice and consent, not by some statute. That is not how Smith was appointed, and he thus could not serve as special counsel even if such a position validly existed. The special counsels contemplated by the Reno regulations are equivalent of, if not more powerful than U.S. attorneys. It is obvious, as an original matter, U.S. attorneys are superior officers, and he has more power than a U.S. attorney, and they're superior officers. And the same is true of special counsels who mirror them. The only plausible argument to the contrary rests not on original meaning, but on a wild overreading of the court's decision in Morrison v. Olson or Edmund v. U.S. Those decisions, especially Edmund, contain language that some lower courts have read to mean that anyone who had a superior or an agency organization chart must be an inferior officer. But if that were true, the Solicitor General, the Assistant Associate Attorney General, and all the Assistant Attorney Generals, all U.S. attorneys, even the Deputy Attorney General, would be inferior officers because they all answer at some level to the Attorney General. It can't be that there's only one is superior officer, and that doesn't, because in that case, everyone would be considered inferior. Likewise, Federal Court of Appeals judges and district judges would be inferior officers because they could be overruled by Supreme Court justices. Could Congress therefore let the AG appoint Court of Appeals judges? Is that what can he do? Is he going to start appointing federal judges next? A Solicitor General or FBI Director? Of course not. One could be a superior rather than inferior officer in two ways. One is to have no decisional superior other than the president. The other is to have so much power and authority that one is superior in a substantive sense. For example, in the late 18th century, a court whose decisions were not subject to review by any other court could nonetheless sometimes be called an inferior court if its jurisdiction or geographic scope was not as extensive as those of other courts. That's why in early draft of Article 3 of the Constitutional Convention proposed creating one or more supreme tribunals. Inferior does not exclusively mean subject to control, direction, or review. It means that much, but can also mean more in certain contexts. As Justice Souter perceptively wrote in his Edmund concurrence, because the term inferior officer implies an official superior who has no superior is not an inferior officer. It does not follow, however, that if one is subject to some supervision and control, one has an inferior officer. So it's getting a little confusing, and let me try and explain this to you. Remember, I'll pause here just so I can walk you through this, okay? There are different level officers of the United States as brought down in the Articles of Constitution. You have a superior officer and an inferior officer. What makes someone, if someone is a superior officer, there's only one way that can happen. Presidential nomination, Senate confirms, presidential appointment. It's a three-step process. That's the process that must happen for anyone who's considered a superior officer. If that does not happen, then he doesn't have the job. What about inferior officers? Inferior officers can happen that way that I just explained, of nomination, confirmation, appointment, or if it's an inferior officer, there could be a statute that's written by Congress that specifically says you can ignore the normal three-step protocol and do it this way. That's only for an inferior officer. The question is, so first they point out there ain't no statute here. But even if there were a statute, it would have to go through the three-step process of a superior officer, not of an inferior officer. Well, how do we figure out what's the difference between a superior officer and an inferior officer? So he said, well, if someone has no boss over them, they're the final say, they're definitely a superior officer. What if you have a boss over you? Does that mean that now you're an inferior officer? Well, the court in Edmund kind of implied that if you have a boss over you, but the point of this brief is that cannot possibly be, because that means each agency would have only one superior officer, and that superior officer has the power to do everything in the office. So what does that mean? That the head of the DOJ now can appoint a federal judge? That makes no sense. So that's how they come to the conclusion. It must be that some superior officers have a wide range of powers and they still answer to a boss. They still answer to a boss above them, but they're still considered a superior officer. And since they're considered a superior officer, you cannot go the whole Congress alternate route. It has to go through that 3-step protocol of nomination, confirmation, appointment. Presidential nomination, Senate confirmation, and appointment. And that's how we maintain separation of powers. Having a superior officer is necessary for an inferior office. If you don't have a superior office, you cannot be an inferior office. But having a superior office is not sufficient to establish that it's not having a superior officer does not mean that you yourself are not a superior officer. Either way, if he's an officer, Smith is a superior officer. He has no superior supervisor or directing him as required by Edmund or Free Enterprise. There's no boss over him. Merrick Garland basically said he does his own thing. So if he's doing his own thing, then he's a superior officer, which means you need to have presidential appointment. I think this is really powerful. This is really powerful takedown. Attorney General Garland does not supervise or direct him, as he said he would not when Smith was appointed special counsel. And Smith has, without the participation of the Solicitor General, filed a petition in court on behalf of the U.S. He's prosecuting a former president. The first time it's happened in our nation's history. Smith is purporting to exercise at least as much power as the U.S. attorney, and arguably more. That's the hallmark of a superior officer who must be appointed as such, meaning presidential nomination, Senate confirmation, presidential appointment. The absence of such appointment means that Smith lacks authority to seek certiorari on behalf of the U.S., and that is a powerful, sufficient reason to deny his petition. Not clothed in the authority of the federal government, Smith is a modern example of a naked emperor. He's all sitting there with his little willy flipping around in the air. Improperly appointed, he has no more authority to represent the United States in this court than Bryce Harper. If you're not familiar, Bryce Harper, a baseball player for the Washington Nationals. Taylor Swift or Jeff Bezos. He's the same as Jeff Bezos. Where's his authority? Where's his authority? Hey, here comes Taylor Swift. I wonder what Taylor Swift is going to say, whether or not she's going to prosecute Trump. That fact is sufficient to sink Smith's petition. The court should deny review. We express no views on the merits issues addressed in Smith's unauthorized petition. Wow. Whoosh, whoosh. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Very powerful stuff. Good stuff. Well written. Really breaks down issues that I gotta tell you, the whole regulations about what's considered special counsel, it's very complex, and they do a neat job of explaining what the role is, how it can be interpreted, what level officer you are. They do a really, really, really neat job. Very good. Excellent job by Meese, Calabrese, and Lawson. Excellent job. Excellent brief. I think that Smith's got problems. I think he could be humiliated here. I think this could end up being really nicely embarrassing for him. We can only hope. We can only hope. But I think there's really good chance this is going to end up blowing up in his face. Anyhow, that's my show for today. I think that covered everything. I didn't expect to. I was worried at a certain point. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I might not make it. But we did. In the end, good things happen. Anyhow, I'm going to pass you on over to my good friend Nick Recato, who right now is covering the Trump petition to the Supreme Court over removal from Colorado ballot. And that's obviously important stuff that you need to know about. So let me send you on over there. I am going to be back tomorrow. I plan on going through the next part of my debate with Destiny, which I only made it halfway through. That's at Locals, which is goodlogic.locals.com. We're up to the part of the debate where it starts getting fiery. In this debate, we're like, at a certain point, we are just, yeah! Me versus Destiny arguing about the Florida indictments. So if you have not caught the first part of it, I urge you to check it out. But I'm getting to the point in debate where it really starts getting the volume, and Destiny starts yelling at me, and he employs help from 2 or 3 other people to basically come to me 3-on-1, because I was just like, no, you're wrong, and here's why. And he's like, you're not answering my question. I just did. It gets fun. I urge you to check it out. I think you're going to enjoy it. Anyhow, Debbie says this guy attacks Judge Video. The guy attacks Judge Video. Brittany mentions link to your XDMs whenever you want it. I'm not going to cover that now. But I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you, Debbie. Oldrill says SCOTUS wants to hear arguments on this January 9, 2024. It's not SCOTUS. It's the, I believe that those arguments are before the circuit court on January 9th. Joe, percent chance SCOTUS finds a way to keep Jack. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how they're going to do it. How are you going to do it? On what authority? What are they going to do? Are they going to label him an inferior officer, and then claim that the Reno regulations end up working for him? I want to hear the argument in his favor that he's able to retain this position. That's what I really want to hear. I want to see the counter to this, because they have to counter this. I mean, this is just decimating his power. This is a really tough brief for him to fight. So I got to see what his justification is before I weigh in with like, oh, he's cooked. I'm just telling you, this seems like a really powerful attack on any jurisdiction that he has whatsoever to go after Trump and sit in the role of I am the United States. That's a real authoritative role that Merrick Garland doesn't seem like he has the authority to give him. So with that, did I miss anything over here? I got you all over here. We're good over here, right? Good on this one. I think it's time for me to start landing my plane. The plane is coming down. Please raise your seats into the upright position. Stow away your tables and trays. And buckle your seatbelts. I am wrapping up over here. I thank you all for joining me. I will see you on Locals tomorrow. And after that, right here. Maybe with my dad. Not promising, but maybe with my dad. We're in talks. I have to negotiate with him. Anyhow, but no matter where you find yourself, I'm going to urge you, make sure that the one thing you really want to do is make sure you stay happy. And you do that, you stay happy, but eat some bugs. As always, my friends, go on speed.